Perfect. And then now with these participants joining us, we are going to start the cycle of web seminars, preventing cycles, prevention, and onboarding of violence in the region. This specific session is called Preempting Violence Through the Socio-Emotional Development, the Case of Aulas en Paz. My name is Paula. I'm an official of education in the offices of UNESCO in Santiago. And today we have with us José Fernando Mejía. He's the executive director of the organization Aulas en Paz. If you let me, I would like to provide a short introduction of why we are gathered today here. And even though we come from different places of the region, we have a common situation, and is that in this place that we are ongoing several crises that are not only having some differentiated situations, but we are also working in an overplaced situation, and with consequences in the situations that we are facing, violence has become one of the more urgent issues in the current world. The ways and expressions of violence that have been historical have been enhanced by issues like social and economical inequality, climate change, forced displacement, and the progress of hate speech. In this scenario, we're not only putting at risk the fundamental rights of a lot of people, but we are eroding a lot of cycles of emotional convivence. This is why this webinar is going to answer a request that we are having from the member states of the region, specifically the ministers of education, about putting in place the potential of education in talking about violence and preventing violence in order to establish some basis for social equity, gender equity, is also general development. And we know that this potential can only be materialized if we develop some historical systems and where all have an active role in the preemption and discussion. I'd like to remind that this initiative is framed within a discussion of the Ministries of Education that started in November last year, that was done in a high-level discussion where we highlighted the urgency of consolidating a regional agenda to stop these several kinds of violence that we're facing in the region. My colleagues from UNESCO that are connected and are talking in this chat are going to mention these materials that we are mentioning so we can check them out. Now we go to the things that we care about. We have a discussion today with José Fernando. José Fernando, Aulas en Paz, just to introduce the colleagues. Many of us that know Aulas en Paz are already aware, but for people of other parts of the regions, it's important to know that this is a Colombian nonprofit organization that for 2 decades have been working on convivence and promoting this through social emotional education. It's been key in the introduction of several policies like the standards of social policies, like the peace studies as well. It's not only developing materials, but it's also been working on politics and developing also some innovative programs. And breathing, for example, one of them is breathing based on mindfulness. This program is focused on preventing school violence and bullying with the development of social emotional abilities in um, first grade students, and is implemented in several countries like Colombia, Mexico, and Chile. It's not per chance that we start with Aulas en Paz, Jose Fernando. It has to do that this is an organization that has been dedicated more than 2 decades on working in these topics, and we are very happy to start with you this series of web seminars that we are going to have until the end of the year, talking about these different topics, not only bullying at school and classroom as we're doing today, but other kinds of violence as well that are affecting the situation of several educational stakeholders. To start, Jose Fernando, I wanted to ask about the origin of Aulas en Paz, and if you could please tell us what was the what motivated you to create it, and which topics you realized that was necessary to
Súper,
discuss in
muchas
this
gracias.
place.
No,
Perfect.
primero, muchas
Thank you very
gracias por la
much. Well, first
invitación.
of all,
Qué
thank you
chévere
very
estar
much for
acá,
this
ya irnos
invite.
como en
It's great to be
confianza y
here,
en una cosa
especially
informal,
I feel
fluida,
almost at home,
distinto a
something
los
very
espacios en
informal,
donde tradicionalmente
very
estamos.
I don't
Sí, ya
know how
20
to
años,
say
yo
this.
no
It
sé a qué
was
horas ha
very easy to
pasado
be
todo este
here.
tiempo y
No,
al
it's
final
been
también
three
estoy con
years
este
almost. I
gusto
don't know
por decirlo de otra
uh,
manera.
how
Y
fast
hace
time
20
flies,
años,
right?
cuando
I'm
comencé a
not so
trabajar en
young.
esto con
And
Enrique desde la
30 years
Universidad de
ago,
los
when we
Andes,
started working
estaba
with
pasando en
Enrique from
Colombia
the
varias cosas.
University
La
of Los
primera
Andes,
es que
we
salieron los
were
estándares
discussing these
nacionales de
things in Colombia.
competencias
We have
ciudadanas, que
the
como todas las
international
políticas
standards
públicas,
of
pues recibe
citizen
atención
competencies.
mixta.
As
Obviamente
always, we have
generalmente
mixed
controversia, hablar
discussion.
de
We generate
competencias siempre ha sido
discussion
complejo
about talking
y hablar
about
de ciudadanía en un
competencies is always
gobierno
complex.
que
Talking about
tenía
citizenship in
por
a
lo menos
government that
dudas en
had
presencia
at
de
least
temas
some
relacionados con
questions
derechos humanos también
in
era
regards to
complejo. Y
human
estar
rights.
en el país contándole a las comunidades
And being
LGBTQ lo
in
que
the country
promovían los
talking
estándares
about
nos
what was
llevó a
promoted in these
identificar varias cosas.
standards
La
led us
primera
to
era
identify several things, and
que
one of them was
usualmente hay un acuerdo
that
grande en
usually there is
términos de que
a
estos
big
temas son importantes.
agreement in regards that
No
these
nos
topics are
peleamos mucho
important.
por cómo lo
We discuss
llamamos o
about
por los
how to
enfoques o
name
las
it and the different
ideologías, pero en
focuses and
general el acuerdo
ideologies, but in
básico es la
general there is
formación
a general
integral es
agreement
importante, hay que desarrollar
of
lo más
this.
allá de lo académico, hay que
General
aprender
training
a
is
convivir, a
important. It's
participar y la
important to go
ciudadanía es
beyond
importante.
academic teaching.
Pero el
Citizenship is
cómo hacer
important,
esto
but
era una
how
gran
to do it,
pregunta, sobre todo en Colombia para quienes
um,
no estén
especially in Colombia,
familiarizados,
for
la
those that
educación
are
está
not aware, in Colombia,
descentralizada.
education
Colombia
is
no tiene
decentralized. So
un único
Colombia
currículo,
does
no hay
not have a
colegios
single
nacionales.
curriculum. We
Eso
don't
tiene cosas
have
muy
national
buenas, pero
texts,
también
and this
algunas
has
cosas
good
que a
things
veces se
and
vuelven
some
obstáculos.
things
Y
that
en el
can become
aterrizaje de cómo
obstacles.
hacer esto en los colegios, en el
And
aula, unos
within
temas de
discussing about how
convivencia, de
to do this
ciudadanía,
within
tendían a
this
volverse muy
classroom, the
de
citizenship
discurso,
part
de
and
decir algo,
tended to
de que
be
está
more
bien o que
about
está
a
mal,
speech,
y aterrizar unas
saying what was
competencias
okay,
era muy
what was
importante.
wrong,
Entonces, de lo primero que
and
pasó es que
putting
comenzamos
this
a
into
desarrollar
discussion is very
material,
important. So we started developing materials
actividades para que los
and
profesores y profesoras pudieran
abilities
desarrollar con sus
so
estudiantes de manera muy
professors
concreta la
develop
idea
this
hacer con mis
in a
estudiantes en
concrete
el
way
aula. Lo
of
segundo
how to
es que en
do
ese momento
we
estábamos
all of
desarrollando
this within the classroom. The
investigaciones
second
alrededor
thing
del
is that
tema de
we
la
can
violencia
develop
escolar
some
relacionada,
research in regards to
perdón por
this
estar muy
school violence
autorreferenciado, pero
connected. Sorry
relacionada con el
about
contexto
this
colombiano.
self-reference
Entonces,
connected
estábamos
with
muy
the
interesados
Colombian
en la construcción
context.
de
So
paz,
we were
porque
very interested
no
in
hablábamos
developing
de
about
paz como
peace.
ahora.
We were not discussing about
Y
peace as we
había
are
una
doing it
pregunta
now.
grande de pues,
And
cuál era el
there
rol
was
de
a
la
big
escuela en la
question about
construcción de
what was
paz,
the role
y
of
ahí
school in
comenzamos
building
a
peace.
entender que
And
hay
in
un
there,
ciclo de
we
violencia
started to
que a
understand that
veces es
there
muy
is a cycle
apropiado
of
para el
violence
nombre
that
de
is
la
very
serie
appropriate for the
de
name of this
seminarios,
series
y
of seminars
queríamos contribuir a
that
romper
we wanted to
el ciclo de
contribute to
violencia.
break.
Básicamente
This
es que los
violent
entornos
cycle
violentos
means that
tienden a
violent
reproducirse en la escuela.
contexts tend
Y la
to be
escuela,
reproduced at school.
lo
In
interesante de esto es
school,
que la
something
reproducción es
interesting from
directa,
this is that
sino que
this
lo que
reproduction of these
comenzamos a
actions is
entender
not direct.
es
And what
que
we
los entornos
started to understand
violentos
was that the
tienden
violent
a
contexts
obstaculizar
end up
aprendizajes de desarrollo de lo que ahora
obstructing
llamamos
some
competencias
development of what
socioemocionales.
we call
Entonces, aunque hay
socio-emotional
algo de aprendizaje
relations.
social, no
So
es
even though
tanto
there
que
is
los
some
niños y niñas
social
aprendan
learning,
a ser
it's not
violentos
about
viendo violencia.
kids
Hay algo de
learning
eso,
to be
obviamente,
violent.
pero
See
lo
violence,
que
of course,
pasa
there's
es que
some influence
cuando
there.
yo estoy en ese
But what
entorno,
happens the most
dejo
is when
de
we are within
conectarme
this
emocionalmente
context,
con los
we stop
socios, tengo una
being
serie de
connecting
ideas que hacen que yo no
emotionally
me
with
comunique
others. I
muy
have a series
bien,
of
que porque
ideas
no tengo
that
habilidades de
don't
regulación
let me
emocional,
communicate as well. I might
seguramente hay
not
ideas
have
de
the ability
exclusión, y entonces las cosas no fluyen tan bien. Y para
communication, so
cerrar esto y
things might
dejar
not flow so well.
que realmente
And to
hablemos,
close this, and we
eh,
let
lo
everyone
primero que
actually
surgió
discuss
fue
this,
qué
the
sabíamos sobre
first thing that
investigación que
appeared was what we
estaba
knew
dándonos
about
pistas y
research
cuál
that
era
was
el
giving us
contexto
some
de lo que
clues,
ocurría
and
en
what
Colombia en
was
ese
the
momento.
context of what was happening in Colombia at that
Ahí
time.
mencionas, José Fernando, algo que te iba a preguntar también
So,
de
Jose, you're mentioning some
muchas de las
things that I
discusiones
was
que
going
se
to
hacen o
ask
que se
as well, and
discuten
many
hoy
of the
en día,
discussions connected to
probablemente muchas
violence in
veces
education
sean como
nowadays, one of the
dependientes,
debates we hear more
¿no?
is what
En,
evidence do we have?
Sí.
porque con evidencia
And
tomamos decisiones.
because with
Y lo que
evidence
ocurre en
we
todos
can
los
do
niveles,
some
como tú
decision
dices,
making, and this
la
happens at
docente en un
different
aula
levels, from
hasta
the
un dirigente de
professor
una
at
familia,
school,
hasta una autoridad
director of
en una
school, school and authorities in, I don't know, a small town and macro level even. So I wanted to ask about this experience of aulas in paz. How do you do this decision making in a more challenging context of little evidence?
Súper importante, porque
So
fíjate
this is very
que
important because
siempre el conocimiento que uno tiene sobre algo es
always
limitado,
the knowledge
pero
that
si
we have
uno
about something
no
is limited.
sabe qué es lo que se sabe alrededor de
So
lo que quiere
if we don't
hacer,
know what is known
pues puede
about
cometer
what we
muchos
want to do,
errores y
we can
además puede
make a
hacer
lot of
cosas que son muy
mistakes
riesgosas y puede haber
and
acción con
we
daño.
can end up doing
Entonces,
some
una de las
things that
cosas
can be
que hicimos el
risky. We
líder
might have
Enrique
action with
fue
damage. One of the
revisar qué
things
experiencias en
that
el
Enrique
mundo
mentioned was to
mostraban
check which
impactos y que
experiences in the world
estuvieran realmente
showed some
reduciendo
impact,
violencia escolar
that were
y
actually
comenzar a aprender
reducing
cuáles
school
eran los
violence,
principios
and
que estaban
starting to
detrás de
learn
esas
which were the
intervenciones,
principles that
porque
we
es que
had
otra cosa que
behind
sabíamos
these
era no
interventions. Because
queremos traer
another
un
thing that we
programa de
knew
fuera y
was that we
simplemente
didn't want
aplicarlo
to
acá
bring
sin ajustes,
um,
queremos hacer
a
algo
program from
propio y
outside
que
and put it
venga de
here
nuestro
without
contexto.
adjustments, something
Aprendimos
that
muchas
comes from our
cosas adicionales
context.
alrededor de
We
eso.
learned
Entonces,
several
ahorita
things
más tarde
with
vamos a hablar.
these modifications
Pero
that we are going to
nos
discuss
encontramos ahora
later.
experiencias en donde aprendimos varias cosas
So
y
we
para
had
darles unos
several
ejemplos.
experiences, and
Una
to
es, hay que
provide you
empezar
some
pronto. O sea,
ideas,
si
is that
uno
we have to
quiere
start
realmente prevenir
soon.
violencia,
If we want to
uno tiende a
start
pensar como en
preventing
las edades más
violence,
problemáticas, la
we
adolescencia,
can
y claro que hay
check
que hacer
how
cosas allí, pero
adolescence is
para la
more
prevención es mucho
troublesome
más
and the
eficiente
things there.
comenzar
So for
pronto. Entonces,
prevention, is more
por eso
efficient
llegamos a
to
la
start
primaria
soon,
y
and that's
no a
why
otras
we
edades. Otra
ended
cosa
up
que
doing
también
this in
parecía
the
que tenía
primary
que ver
school,
con el
not in
impacto,
other
es
levels.
la
Another
llegada
thing that had to do
multicomponente,
with
que son
impact
ideas que
was the
vienen de
reach
la
of
salud pública.
multi-components that are some
Es cómo
ideas
nos
that come
enfocamos
from
en
public health.
atender
So
y
it's how we
dar
focus on
posibilidades de
responding and
aprendizaje a
providing
todos los
some
niños y a
learning
toda la comunidad
possibilities to all the
educativa,
kids
pero
and
también
all
cómo
the
hacemos para
educational community,
llegar a
but
las
also
personas en más
how we
riesgo,
do
para
so we
nosotros
can
los
reach
niños
to
y las
people
niñas más
at more
agresivos,
risk, that are the
y
more
llegar desde
aggressive
una
children,
perspectiva de
and
soporte, de
reaching this
qué es lo
from a
que
perspective
necesitan
of
aprender
support,
estos niños y niñas y cómo
what
podemos
they need to
añadir
learn
a
and
eso.
how we
Entonces, la
can add
estructura
this.
multicomponente de aulas en
So the
paz se basa en eso. Y
multi-component
otra
structure of Aulas en
es,
Paz is
esto no
based
es
on this.
solamente de la escuela, aquí la familia
Another thing
también tiene
is
que
that
ver.
this is not
Entonces,
only from
aulas en
school.
paz tiene una
Um,
llegada
uh,
de
Family has
talleres
to do
con
with this.
padres y madres
Aulas en
y
Paz, some
además
workshops
algunos
with parents
específicamente
as
con las
well,
familias de los niños y
some
niñas
also with the families
en
of
más
the
riesgo,
children
que
that
están
are more at
más,
risk, that
más
are
asociados
more
con
connected
comportamientos
to
agresivos y violentos.
some behaviors that
Y otra
can
cosa
be
fue clima del bullying.
violent
Bueno, para
and
nosotros
active.
comenzamos a hablar
Another
de
thing
bullying
had
hace
to do
20
with
años,
bullying. We started
pero
talking
Aulas en
about
Paz
bullying 20
no es un
years ago,
programa que
but
se enfoque
Aulas
en
en Paz
prevenir
is
ni
not a
eliminar el
program that
bullying.
is
Aulas en
focused
Paz se
on
enfoca
preventing
en
and
generar
managing
ambientes de
bullying.
convivencia
We are
pacífica.
dealing with
¿El bullying
generating
hace
some
parte de eso?
context of
Sí,
peaceful
pero no es
convivence.
todo,
Is
que es
bullying
bien
part of that?
importante porque
Yes, but it's
siento que
not
el bullying se
everything.
convirtió
It's
como en
important
algo,
because I believe that
ganamos
bullying
tanta sensibilidad con
it
el
became
tema
something
y
like
creo
we
que
gained so much
ya nos
sensitivity about
pasamos
it that I believe
casi que
that
pensamos
is
que bullying y
too much
violencia
now.
escolar son
We believe
sinónimos
almost
y
that
eso no es
bullying
cierto.
and school violence are the same, and it's
Antes de
not
hacer la
true.
siguiente pregunta, solamente quería
Um,
saludar
Before the next
a
question, I
algunos de
wanted to
nuestros
say
colegas.
hello
Veo
to
un
some
grupo
of our
pequeño de
colleagues. I
profesoras,
see that we have
personas de los
some
ministerios,
teachers, professors,
personas
members of the
profesionales,
ministries of
solamente
several
para nombrar
countries in the
algunos
region,
que van a
just to
estar
name some of them,
participando
because
desde
of course we
Colombia,
might
desde
miss some
Colombia,
of them. We
Guatemala,
have people
Ecuador,
from Colombia,
Brasil,
Venezuela,
Perú,
Guatemala,
Bolivia,
Chile, Brazil,
República Dominicana,
Peru, Mexico,
Argentina,
República Dominicana,
Uruguay, España,
and Uruguay, Spain, Bahamas,
eh,
Honduras, and Trinidad and
algunos
Tobago.
mencionamos ya en
If I'm
el
missing
chat
one, please let me know in
un
the
buen
chat. But
reflejo,
it's
no
just
necesariamente de la
very
percepción
important to
regional.
see how worried we are in
Esto no
the
es
region
un
about these
desafío de un
topics.
único país.
This is not a challenge of a
Y
single
también tiene que
country,
ver con una cosa
and
que
it has
mencionaba
to do
sobre
um,
no
with
sé
some
llamarlo errores,
things
ahí tú me
that
puedes
I
decir si son
mentioned.
errores
I
no
don't know
o
if I can say
aprendizajes que
that
dimos,
these are mistakes
mencionaba
or some learnings on
principalmente
on the way,
esas
but in general, when
intervenciones
we
de
talk about
buscar
experiences and
transformar
intervention,
fenómenos
is
en la
that we
escuela
look to transform some
durante la
phenomena at
pandemia. Yo
school,
creo que esto
and
probablemente
not only
está,
violence. And I believe that these,
está operando
of course,
en
is
muchas temáticas
operating
de educación
at different levels of
que nos
education.
cuentan una historia de los éxitos, ¿no? Y
Uh,
nosotros contamos las historias de los
Tells us a
fracasos.
story of this
Pero quería
success.
preguntarte, mencionaste algunas intervenciones
And
antes con
first of
madres,
all,
mencionaste la
you
experiencia con
mentioned some
aulas.
interventions with
¿Cómo
parents
funcionan estos
and
talleres?
some
¿Qué
interventions
hacen
at
estos momentos
school,
de
in the
apoyo con aulas?
classrooms. So I would like to know how it started, like, is there something that didn't work?
Claro,
How
mucho.
how was
Yo
it?
sí creo que hay que llamarlo
Well, yes, of
errores y
course.
porque
And I
parte
believe
de
that
lo que hay
we
que
have to
comenzar a
call them
entender es
mistakes.
que
And part of what
aprendemos
we need to
gracias a
learn
nuestros
is that we
errores,
learn
¿sí? No a
from our
pesar de ellos.
mistakes and not of
Parte
not
de lo que yo creo
uh,
que debe pasar en la escuela es que los
even with
errores
them.
se vuelvan
But
realmente una
part of what
oportunidad de
we need
aprendizaje
to learn at
y que
school
no
is that
los
they become an
castiguemos,
opportunity
sino
of
que
learning
los
and not
promovamos para
punishing them,
aprovecharlos y
but
para realmente darles la vuelta.
actually
A ver,
promoting
aprendimos
them and
mucho. Bueno,
turning
una de
them
las cosas
around
que
is
Aulas en Paz
not
tenga ese
learning in
impacto no es
spite of
solamente
them,
que
but
está
learning from
basado
them.
en
So
conocimiento científico,
this
sino que el
impact is not only
desarrollo de
based on
Aulas en Paz
scientific
estuvo muy
knowledge, but the
probado.
development of
Tuvimos
Aulas and
muchos
Paz was really well
pilotajes,
proved.
muchas
We had
evaluaciones
several pilots,
formativas,
several
estuvimos probando en
training
diferentes contextos
evaluations.
en
We
aulas,
tested
los
in
profesores
different
la que
programs,
enganchaba a los
and
estudiantes, que no los
we
enganchaba,
noticed that it actually
producimos
matched
muchos
with the
materiales y
students,
cuando
which
llegamos a
most
trabajar
them
en las
which didn't,
escuelas,
which
ahí
things
pasó
didn't,
algo que para
and we
nosotros
produced a
fue
lot of materials. And
muy,
we
muy
start when we
transformador,
started
porque
working at
Aulas en
schools,
Paz estaba,
something
tenía un
happened
principio
that
de
really changed us.
materiales y
Aulas and Pass had
herramientas,
a principle of
pero
materials
cometimos
and
un error
tools, but
gigante
we
porque
made a
empezamos pensando
huge
que los
mistake at the
materiales y
beginning,
las herramientas eran
thinking that the
suficientes,
materials and the tools was
porque nos
enough,
dimos cuenta de que realmente
because
lo
we
más importante no
realized
es la
that the
herramienta,
most
sino las
important thing is not
personas,
only the
que
tool but
las
the people,
personas en los colegios que
and that
deberían ser
people at
protagonistas de
school
esto
that
son los
should be
maestros y
the
las
protagonists
maestras.
of this are
Y
the
ahí comenzamos
teachers.
a
And in
no tanto
there,
darle la
we
vuelta, pero sí a
realized
complementar
that
nuestra
we
mirada
not only have to
seguimos
turn it
pensando que los
around, but
materiales son
actually complementing,
importantes, pero no son lo
saying by
más
saying that
importante.
materials,
Nada
yes, they are
reemplaza al
important, but they are
docente,
not the
nada
most
reemplaza a
important.
una profesora
Nothing
o un profesor. Pueden tener los
replaces a
materiales más
teacher.
maravillosos,
You might
pero son las
have the
personas
most
los que lo
marvelous
hacen
materials, but our
real.
people
Y eso
what
fue
make
un
this
cambio
a
bien
reality.
importante, porque
And this was
pasamos
a
de
very
desarrollar
important change
materiales a
because we
acompañar
went from
profesores,
developing
a
materials to
realmente pensar
accompany
que
some
nuestro trabajo
professors, some
tenía que
teachers,
ver con
and getting to
acompañar
know
personas que hacen
that
un
the
trabajo
work
maravilloso,
was
que son en
actually
realidad
accompanying
héroes,
people that are doing some
eh,
marvelous job
pero que
and
muchas
that
veces
are actually
no han
heroes, but
tenido
that
el
many
soporte y el
times might not have
acompañamiento que
had the
necesitan en una
support and
profesión
follow-up that they
difícil,
need
dura y
in a
retadora.
profession that
Y
is
no es que
difficult, that
nosotros
is hard
sepamos
and
cómo hacerlo,
challenging. And
es
it's
más
not
como
that we
pensar cómo
don't know
estar
how to
lado a
do it,
lado,
but it's more like
acompañándonos y
about being side by
aprendiendo
side,
para resolver
supporting each
retos
other
bien,
so
bien
we can
complejos.
solve some
Esa
very
fue una de
difficult
las cosas.
challenges.
Y otra
This was
que hemos
one of the
aprendido
things.
es
And another thing that we
relacionada con
learned
los
was
materiales,
connected with
que
the
los
materials,
materiales tienen que
that
ser
the
flexibles y
materials have to be
diferentes
flexible
dependiendo no
and
solamente de
different,
sus contextos,
depending obviously
sino
on the context
con una
and
aproximación un
also
poco
with an
tradicional.
approach that
Y
is
yo
more
siento que ahora
traditional.
la
And
llegada
I feel
tradicional
that
con
now
currículos
this
muy rígidos,
traditional
clase a clase, secuencia
engagement
didáctica,
with
está un poco
different
agotado.
sequences is a little bit
Estamos pensando más en un
um,
esquema más de caja de
overused, and we
herramientas,
are
de
thinking
desarrollo de
about a scheme
capacidades y de
of a
uso
toolbox,
flexible de
developing
diferentes cosas. Ahora
activities
sí, me
and
fui más al
different
resto.
uses. And if you
Y
want,
otra
I can
cosa que
tell you
aprendimos es que
more
cuando
later. Another
dimos
thing
la
we
vuelta a
learned
trabajar
is
con
that when we
docentes,
turned it
nos
around
dimos cuenta
to
de que había
working with
varias cosas que no
teachers, we
estábamos
realized that
atendiendo.
there were several
Una,
things that we
las
were not responding
competencias
to.
de los
One of
adultos,
them,
porque claro,
the
uno está pensando
competences
mucho en los
of
niños,
the
¿cierto?
adults. We are thinking about
Pero se le
always
olvida que en realidad
adults,
somos los adultos
sorry,
que
children
trabajamos
and
con niños, porque
adolescents, but
primero
we
tenemos que
forget
pensar cómo
that
estamos y cómo
we
están nuestras
as
propias
adults
competencias. Yo
are
no puedo enseñarle a
have to
nadie a
think about
manejar sus
ourselves and think
emociones
about how
si
we are
yo
doing with our
mismo
competencies.
no puedo
I mean, I
manejarlas de una
cannot
manera
teach someone
adecuada.
how to
Y yo no
handle
estoy hablando, por
their
favor, de que
emotions
seamos monjes
if I don't
zen
know
ni
how to
mucho
handle
menos.
my
No,
own
la perfección no
emotions. I'm not
existe
talking
y no hay
about
nadie
becoming
que
a Zen
maneje sus emociones
master.
a la
I
perfección.
know that
Siempre
there is
cometemos
no
errores.
person that
Lo
can handle
importante es
this perfectly. We
reconocerlos,
always
verlos y
might
estar en
make
un camino de
mistake. The
aprendizaje y
important thing
hacerlo
is to
junto con
recognize
los
them and to
estudiantes.
build some
Lo otro,
learning
o sea, será diferente
path
para los
through this.
distintos
And the other
países
thing that
que
might
nos
be different
acompañan
in
hoy,
different countries that
es
we
que
have here
los
today
temas de
is
manejo de
that the
grupo, de
topics
manejo de
of group
disciplina y de
handling
manejo de
and discipline
poder
handling
se volvieron
and
también
power
claves.
handling
Entonces,
became key
el
as
cómo
well.
manejo la
So,
disciplina en el
how I
aula,
handle
cómo abro
discipline
espacios
at school,
incluyentes,
how I open
donde
some,
en realidad
including
exista una relación no
spaces where
horizontal y
we
donde el
have an
docente se
horizontal
sienta seguro.
relationship and where
Si
people
esto no
actually feel
está,
safe.
lo que
If
yo
this
sé
is
con los
not uh,
materiales no tiene
possible there,
realmente un
what we
piso
have
fuerte
with
sobre
the
el cual
materials might not
pararse.
have a base where we can step on. on.
Y José Fernando mencionabas hace un ratito,
So,
bueno,
Jose, you were mentioning now
errores, aprendizajes que además en la
about
escuela
some
podrían
mistakes
intentar intervenciones
learning from this, that can operate in different interventions in each moment. There might not be the same intervention in one school from the other, because the experiences are different, and you insist in the center of the person, be it a student, teacher, some of the directors or something. So I wanted to ask about these allies or key stakeholders that sometimes are not as traditional as we think. And in a way, they might break this traditional scheme of school that we have, where we have hierarchical relationships, power relationships. We have ways to behave and not to behave with certain people, but I wanted to ask about the allies and stakeholders that were important for this process, and if you had some allies and stakeholders that were not the
Uy, qué
traditional
pregunta
ones.
tan interesante.
Well, this is a
Entonces,
very
primero
interesting
dentro de la
question.
escuela
And
o yo que
first
digo a
of
los
all, at
docentes son
school, the
siempre
directives,
fundamentales.
the
También fue algo de lo
teachers
que
are
nos dimos
fundamental.
cuenta pronto,
This
pero
is
acá hay
something
una
that we
cosa
realized
bien
quite
paradójica y es que
soon.
llegamos a
But
algunos
there is
colegios
something
en algunos
paradoxical here, that
casos
is
donde
that
los
we
rectores o los
reached to
directivos
some
docentes
school, some cases
nos
where the
llevaban con mucha
directives
emoción, como que
actually
decían
led
necesitamos
us
aulas en
with a
paz, por
lot of
favor
emotion,
vengan, y
saying, hey,
cuando
we need
llegábamos allá
uh, cla-
nos encontrábamos a veces
classrooms
con
with peace.
comunidades
And
donde
many
los
times when we
profesores
got
no
there,
estaban tan
we found
convencidos y los
communities where
profesores, esos
professors
que
were not
pasan todo
so
el mundo,
convinced.
están
And this
llenos de
happens around the globe
trabajos, no
because they are
tienen un
full
segundo para
of
nada, cualquier
things
cosa
to
que
do.
quiere
They
decir que
have
también que para el
not a
trabajo
single second
tratamos
free,
de decir que
and
no,
everything
que
that
es un apoyo
appears
para lo que
might be
hacemos,
more
pero sí es más
work to do.
trabajo. Entonces,
We try to
la
say,
voluntad
no,
de
it's
las
just support,
personas es
but it's a lot
básica para
of
cualquier
work to do.
cosa y en
So
el
the
caso
willingness
nuestro,
of
pues
people
obviamente no
is
fue excepción.
fundamental. And in
En
our case,
México
of
pasó
course,
algo
was no exception.
interesante
In
pensando en los
Mexico, something
aliados
interesting
y es que
happened
nosotros
in
tenemos
regards
este
to
otro
allies, and is that we
componente
have this
focalizado para los niños
component
y niñas en más
focused
riesgo,
for
que tiene unas sesiones
children
fuera
more
del
at risk,
aula,
that has
con
some
grupos
sessions
heterogéneos,
outside
donde
of
hay
the
dos niños o
classroom
niñas
with
con altos niveles
heterogeneous
de agresión y cuatro
groups,
con altos
where we
niveles de
have
antisocialidad, de manera que
children with
los
high
adolescentes
levels of
jalen,
aggressions,
empujen,
in a
modelen
way in which
a
the
los agresivos.
pre-socials can
Siempre
model
eso es
the
bien
aggressives,
importante porque cuando se
the
cambia
aggressive ones.
puede
And this is
causar el
an
efecto
important
contrario.
difference, because
En
when we
México
change it, it
comenzamos a
can
hacer algo que no hemos hecho
generate
en ningún otro país
a different
y es que eran las
context. And
familias,
in Mexico, it
mamás,
happened that the
abuelitas,
families,
las que
mothers, fathers,
lideraban
were
esos
the ones that
espacios y lo
led these
facilitaban.
spaces and
Y
facilitate them.
eso me pareció que
And
siempre
I
fue una
believe that
cosa
this was so
maravillosa y no hemos
amazing,
podido replicarlo
and
en
we
otras
haven't been
ciudades.
able
Ojalá
to
lo podamos
replicate it
hacer
in different
porque
cities. I hope
sería
to do
chévere.
it, because it
Otros
would be
aliados que nos
marvelous.
hemos
Some other
encontrado,
allies that
yo
we
no
have
sé si sean
found
tan
that
extraños,
I
las
don't know if
empresas
they are so
privadas, por
weird,
ejemplo.
but private
Entonces,
companies
muchas
actually
empresas
were
privadas nos
amazing.
han
So
apoyado para llevar
several
aulas en
companies
paz
actually
o
helped
bien
us
a los
to lead
colegios de los
aulas and pass
colaboradores o
to
a los colegios que
schools,
están en su
the
zona de
schools of the
influencia, que
collaborators,
es
schools in their area of
algo
influence,
sorprendente porque uno no
which was
espera
really amazing,
todo
because
eso.
you
Y
don't
más
kind of expect
recientemente
to do this.
hemos
And more
construido muchos
recently,
lazos con
we
organizaciones
generate certain
comunitarias.
connections
Ya en
with more
proyectos que trascienden
community
el programa Aulas en Paz en
areas.
primaria y que tienen que ver más
From
con
this project
una
of Aulas and
llegada
Pass in primary
territorial, pero
school, kind
organizaciones
of
de
arriving at
jóvenes,
the
organizaciones
territory
de
with young
mujeres,
people
la
organizations,
iglesia
young
también
people
se ha
organizations.
convertido en un aliado porque
The
llega
church was a huge
líderes de
ally, because
educación,
it
sobre todo
arrives
en
leading
contextos
education,
muy
especially in
difíciles en donde
very
otras
difficult
personas
contexts where people
no
might
llegan.
not reach.
En realidad hemos aprendido que solos no podemos
We
y
have
eso
learned
también,
that
de
we
pronto nos falta
cannot do
aprender
it
más sobre eso,
alone, and we
porque a
perhaps
veces
need
uno
to learn
está
more
tan
about it.
convencido de lo que hace, porque además, pues que
We are so
todos
sure about what we
decidimos
do,
con buenas razones lo que hacemos.
because we
Entonces,
decide
uno
with good
tiene en su
reasons what we do.
cabeza un
So we
cuentico
have
que
in
se
our
cree.
mind
Entonces uno
a
cree que
story that we
sabe cuál
believe
es la
in.
manera de
So we
hacer las
believe that we
cosas
know
y
the way
cuál es
to
la
do
forma de
things, and
abordar los
what is the
problemas.
right
Y lo
way
cierto es
to
que la de uno es
engage with
una, no
these
es la.
issues. But the truth is
Y
that
entonces
our
mientras
way
hayan
is just
personas que
one way,
piensan
not
distinto,
is
que
not the way.
inclusive están
So
en otra
finding people that
orilla,
think
que
differently, that are
critican
on
lo
the
que
other
haces,
side,
ha sido
that are
súper
actually
positivo.
criticizing
Yo
what you
sé que eso
do,
es
has
tan
been
difícil
actually
y
very
esto
positive. I
es de
know
esas
it's
cosas
hard,
fácil
and this
decirlo,
is one
pero
of
que
the
en la
things
vida
that is
real es
easier.
difícil hacerlo. Pero nosotros
It's
sí,
easier to
pues con
say
los
than to
últimos
do,
años hemos
but
aprendido
in the
mucho de
last few years, we have
personas,
actually learned a lot
organizaciones y
about
gente que hace las
people,
cosas bien
organizations, and
diferente.
people that
Yo
do things in a
esperaría que
different
también
way.
pase lo
And I would
contrario.
expect
Es
that
decir,
the opposite happens
como
as
que
well.
siento que
So, I
nosotros
mean,
también
I
tenemos
believe that
mucho que
we
aportar
have a
y
lot
que
to contribute
las
as well,
diferentes
and
visiones,
that
la
the
gran mayoría de
different
las veces,
visions,
perdón,
most of the time,
no,
are
no son
not
excluyentes, sino
are not
complementarias.
excluding, but are instead complementary. So
pensando además en un
I was
contexto
thinking
muy
of a
polarizado,
context that is
donde las
highly
opiniones aparecen
polarized, where in
como
general
posibilidad de conflicto
opinions appear
inmediato,
as opportunities for
y
immediate
además el
conflict,
conflicto siempre
right?
produce temor,
That
la idea
conflict
de que hay
actually
que
generates
resolver
fear, the idea that we
rápidamente
need to
la
silence
escuela
conflict right
para
away
hacia
at
algo
school
distinto cuando
so
realmente
we
hay
can
que
get to
estar
something different
generando todo
when
entre
actually
los
conflict
padres que
is
decían, quienes opinaban
transversal to all
y
of
uno
this.
mismo
And
decir también se
people that
constituye
thought
una persona
different in
que
our
apoya la
interventions
solución
became actually
más,
the
¿no?
ones that
Que
actually
permite mejorar la
supported
experiencia en el
us at
aula.
the end,
Sin embargo,
allowed
la
it to
pregunta
improve and
enmarca
do it better. And I wanted to ask
eso, ¿no?
also about this.
Estos aliados y
These
actores
allies
clave dentro,
and
bueno, mencionaste
key
especialmente
stakeholders at
a
school.
docentes en un
You
contexto de
mentioned
carga laboral
the teachers in
probablemente
a
no les da toda la
context
razón.
of
No me atrevería a decir
overload,
si hay
let's
un
say,
país donde eso no sea
at
así.
work. I believe that is common in our countries, let's say, but
¿Qué aseguraba que ustedes
which
tuviesen
ensured that
aliados
you would
a esa
have
mesa y
as
se
allies these
hubo alguna estrategia en
professors, these
particular?
Sí,
teachers? Did you have a specific strategy in
sí.
place or something?
Hay algo que pasa con estos temas y es que
Well,
porque
there
hay
is
muchas
something that
personas
happens
que
with
muchas
this, and is
veces
that
dicen,
you
eso
find
no
people that
eso
can
no es mi
say,
problema, no me
um,
compete, yo soy
this is
profesor
not my
gay, entonces
problem,
déjenme ahí
is
con la
not my
matemática, eso no es en mi
issue.
lenguaje,
You
eso es de la
are, I
familia,
don't know,
eso
a
no tiene que ver
teacher of
con otras
maths and
cosas. Ahí, por
languages or
ejemplo, lo que
whatever
nos
it is.
sirve son
This has to do
exámenes
more with
con
the
los
family
retos.
and other things.
Entonces,
So what
no
we
hay
do
un
is actually
profesor ni una
connecting
profesora
with the
que
challenges.
no viva
There is
situaciones
no
retadoras de
teacher
disciplina en su
that
hogar. Entonces,
actually doesn't
el cómo
face
construir un ambiente
situations of discipline
libre de
within the
agresión y
classroom. So to
violencia,
build
incluyente,
a classroom, an
democrático, es
environment
un tema
that is
que
democratic,
conecta a todo el mundo
free
porque
of
los profes
violence, is
sufren
something that
mucho esto.
connects with
O
everyone,
sea,
because actually
el
teachers
tener
suffer
ambientes
this a lot.
agresivos no le gusta a
Having these
nadie. No, uno
aggressive
no está feliz, los
contexts
niños no
and
están felices,
environments
el
are
adulto no está
terrible.
feliz.
We are not
Entonces,
happy,
darles
children are
técnicas
not
para
happy, the
manejar
teacher
eso
is not happy. So
usualmente
providing
llegan.
techniques to
Lo
handle
otro
this
es este nivel
actually
personal.
is
Entonces,
well
donde
received.
uno
The other thing is
realmente
this
las mejores
personal level,
experiencias de aulas en
where
paz
we,
las,
the
están
more
las de
better
los niños y
experience
los
of aulas
podemos
en paz,
demostrar,
we
pero
have
las
the
que más me
children
gustan a
and the
mí
ones to show.
son
But the
las
ones that
de
I like the
adultos que
most
cuentan cómo
have to do with
actualizaron
adults
sus vidas.
that tell how
Entonces,
they have
me
used
acuerdo ahora de
this
personas, de
within their
uno de
daily
nuestros
lives. I was
financiadores
thinking about a
en
person,
Cali,
one of their
una
supporters in
empresa
Cali.
importante en Cali nos
A very
financiaba
important
y
company
una
in
de las
Cali
trabajadoras de esa
was
empresa
providing some financial support, and one
llegaba
of the
y ella era
workers
la que convencía a la
there
gente de que
arrived,
Aulas en
and
Paz
she
era
was the one
maravilloso
that convinced
por lo
people
que había
that
pasado con ella y
Aulas
su
in
hija.
Paz was
Entonces ella
marvelous
sabes que
because of
las
what
pantalleras
happened
de
with
Aulas en
her
Paz,
and
la
her
relación con mi hija
little girl.
mejoró,
So
la
after this
comunicación
workshop
es
of Aulas in
distinta, me
Paz,
di
my
cuenta de
relationship
muchas
with my
cosas
daughter
que tenía
improved.
que hacer y dije,
Communication
aquí
is
está la
different.
cosa, o
I
sea,
realized about
realmente
several things that we could
son
do,
esas transformaciones
and
de lo que
it's
somos
actually this
los
transformation
más
of what
importantes.
we
Y eso
do and
siempre
what we are,
termina,
and how
obviamente,
important it
mostrando lo que
is. And
hacemos.
this ends
Dicho
up
eso, no es suficiente.
affecting
Es
what we
decir,
do.
puede que yo sea una
Having said that,
persona
it's
con
not enough.
habilidades
I might be a
maravillosas
person with
socioemocionales,
marvelous
pero pasa lo
socio-emotional
mismo que
abilities.
con
The
cualquier cosa
same
en
happens
pedagogía,
as
y es las
with any
habilidades
other thing if,
pedagógicas
within
no
pedagogy.
necesariamente son
The
las mismas que
pedagogical
mis
abilities
habilidades
are not
disciplinarias. Yo puedo
necessarily the
saber
same
muchas
as disciplinary
matemáticas, pero no
abilities. I might
necesariamente sé
know a
cómo
lot
promover
about maths,
aprendizajes alrededor de
but
eso.
I don't
Eso
know how
pasa
to
lo mismo.
promote learning
Entonces
through
necesito
this.
también
This is
desarrollar
the same.
habilidades
So I need to develop
pedagógicas,
some
entender cómo
pedagogical
hacer eso,
abilities to
porque
learn how
además
to do
con
this,
los temas que
because on
trabajamos
top of this, with the
es muy
topics that
fácil que
we
esto se
handle,
vuelva
it's
discurso,
quite easy that
sermón,
this
cantaleta,
becomes
decimos
a preach,
en
a
Colombia.
sermon,
Y
or
esto hay que
as we
volverlo
call it in
práctica,
Colombia,
realidad.
cantaleta. And this
Hay
has to
que
become a
realmente
praxis,
pensarlo
a
como
reality. And
entrenamiento.
we have to
Yo
think
sé que
about
hablar de
this as
entrenamiento
training.
a
I
veces
know
suena
that talking
como
about training feels a little bit
retador, pero yo siento que
challenging,
estas cosas
actually.
hay que
But I
desarrollarlas y
believe that
entrenarlas.
these
De pronto
things need
podemos
to be
encontrar otras
developed and
palabras
trained.
mejores,
We might
pero además
find some other
esto, y
better
además uno
words,
no
let's
aprende
say,
esto
and we
bien del
don't
todo, siempre
actually
estamos en
learn
esto.
this
Es
well
un
right away.
camino de
We
aprendizaje
are
que
always
no
doing
termina
this.
nunca.
This is a road of learning that never ends, actually.
Últimamente, José Fernando, hemos escuchado mucho
Lately, Jose
de
Fernando,
actores
we have heard a
educativos
lot about
diciéndonos
educational stakeholders that have talked about,
expresiones o formas de
I don't know,
violencia que
some
pensaban
expressions
que eran
or
ajenas a
ways
la
of
escuela,
violence
hoy
that we
día
thought that
suceden en la
were
escuela, dentro de la
foreign to
escuela,
school
en
and
el
are
terreno de
taking
la escuela
place
y
now
definitivamente
at
del aula,
school
¿no?
many
Y
times
en ese
within the
sentido,
classroom. And in this
por
way,
ejemplo, el
I
Colombian
believe that that is affecting us a lot, what you were saying about how things at school might transform the interpersonal activities outside of school, that we might end up working a lot with these superstitions, but many times we forget. But I was also thinking about the opposite, that these expressions and ways of violence that used to operate, I don't know, in the digital side with the hybrid education, it actually appears there. So these ways and expressions that we felt foreign to school are nowadays entering there. And in this way, I understand this better when they say it's important to have some collective comprehension, but also this shared pain that we feel with these educational stakeholders that are at school. And this might be a good first step if we think that at the end, if in the school there might not be violence and that the school is free of violence, without looking at these other influences and factors that might affect not thinking about more integral engagement. I wanted to go now to another topic that might be relevant to the participants of this seminar that has to do with an experience in Colombia and how can we escalate this to other contexts. How do we escalate to a number of interventions at the level of the country actually the ways of violence that operate in other countries that are different, considering language barriers as well, and idiomatic points. So what is the process? So what are the biggest challenges? Because the challenges are there, but just let me check because I forgot something from the previous conversation and had to do with another of the things that actually helps working with teachers and is arriving as some kind of support for them as well, not only in their work, but also thinking that effectively is one of the most stressing professions in the world, and that many times we don't have practices of self-care that now, of course, after pandemic, they became popular and it's very good, but we need to put them into things that are more effective. And then is where we go back to the evidence of impact. We have to check what actually works to handle stress, because otherwise we end up doing some of the things that are done there. Some of these things work, some other might worsen things. Mindfulness, I know about it. I'm not on that line of thought. However, there is a lot of evidence that says that these are one of the most things, one of the things that works the best around the world. There are proofs of this. So working on the well-being of the teacher is something fundamental, and of the caregivers, parents, of course, and other people. And going back to the challenges of scaling this, one of the things that happened is that Aulas en Paz is a model that is very well built. We have this multi-component model, teaching materials, a way to get there, and this actually ends up generating some issues there because we make a mistake by thinking that there is a perfect or silver bullet for that works for everything. So actually, focusing on the teachers actually helped us to think about the role of the program and the involvement of teachers and communities that are very different. Our countries are actually very different and very diverse. Colombia is one of the first places in diversity. So working with a school in the Atlantic or Pacific coast, at the south of the country, in Orinoquia or the Amazon, with indigenous population, Afro population, are very different worlds. However, on the other hand, we have some universal things like respecting each other, empathy, communication, and is how to balance these things that we have with the things that are generating some consensus without thinking about having silver bullets and valuing actually diversity, and the diversity in the how, in the what, there is more consensus, but the how can be different. This was very challenging, and leaving Colombia was also very important. It was thanks to a program of the American states that was very different. They provided some support so we could ally with an organization in Mexico. Via Educación came and we talked with schools, provided some training. We actually translated or adjusted these materials because the way in which we speak are very different. So words might be confusing, and it actually goes beyond words. It's the way we communicate. For instance, there are countries where we have more closeness and we can talk with certain speech patterns with the professors and are okay. There are some others where we can say tú. There are some others where we have to use the more formal usted. And you see, some things actually happen, like this situation with the families actually leading some components that hadn't gone beyond Colombia and that started changing the program and having a more Mexican version in Chile. Something similar happened. We started having some situations, and the first thing we had to do was to think about the context. Before we thought about the adjustments, was actually reading and saying, this actually makes sense here. And if it did make sense, then how? And then we could say, hey, let's bring this, let's translate this, and let's use it, because that's what we do. We are always doing and running pilots. And we are 20 years, and time is running. And if you ask me, the curriculum that we have now is a very advanced version with a lot of turns and adjustments, but is still not perfect. So we need to start turning it around, because 20 years, in 20 years, we've learned about some things that need to lead us to change, actually. And within this logic, which internal process did you do to say, hey, we can escalate this or we cannot escalate this? Because I imagine that there is some decision making involved there, like which things and which components of the program are led to be escalated and or led to other countries. So it actually depends on how we get to a country. In part is how we decide on this. Getting to other countries so far with the full program have been well handled. So 10, 20 schools, follow-up team, and in there what we try is to have the different components, because on top of this, the evaluation that we have, that has been one of the things that is important there, has shown that the full package generates an impact. We don't have an evaluation of how much each of the components weighs there. So we are a little bit scared kind of to the turn down this package kind of separated in parts, because we are thinking about different ways to organize this. But when you think at a higher scale, when you try to reach a lot more people, there are different scales. One of these is transference, that we call. That is what we know about Aulas in past, that is not the program. We need to disassemble it. Like many times I want to take Aulas and Pass for the world. Not only something that I want, but it's also having a lot of testimonies of reasons why this is good. But not everyone would want to have Aulas en Paz. And why? Even my context is different, but how can we handle to deal with this that can be transferred and is important? What can we share with others? And we did with the World Bank and the Ministry of Education in Peru, the Socioemotional Curriculum for Peru. Step by Step is the name, and is translated in English for those of you that are English speakers. And this is another way to escalate this. It's not taking Aulas en Paz, the program, Classrooms in Peace, but it's actually contributing what we learned with things that other people do, and not necessarily promoting the organization or the name, but actually what we know how to do. Now we are working together with Coahuila, Mexican state, because they are working on a socio-emotional development program. We are working with a bigger team, with other organizations. We're working on some working sessions, social-emotional workshops for early childhood and primary school, and there are other ways to escalate this, that is checking from what we have. what is the thing that we can escalate the best? And one of the things that we learned from a couple of years ago is to put all these materials available without restrictions. In the chat, you can find our webpage. You can enter there. If you have children, you can use our audiobooks to work with your children. If you have students as well, if you need something, of course, you can let us know. But all of this is free of use without restriction. You don't even have to register whatsoever. And this is another way to escalate all this work that we are doing. So we are thinking about how to build a way to reach here that is softer, let's say, because Aulas with the complete program is difficult, is not for everyone, whilst if we build something that is lighter with free materials, open materials, and training models that are shorter, there we could have something good. José Fernando, I wanted to ask because someone actually some of the participants asked, and is which countries of the region you have worked with, and why is it easy? Well, it's because we usually contact them due to some friendship, actually, because we meet people that are interested in this program, and the first country we reached that was not Colombia was Mexico, and we got to Mexico because this organization, Via Educación, is with have some friends, people that we trust that is very interested in this. To Chile, we got actually Diego Piñuel was the person that contacted us so we could reach Chile. He's actually now a friend, but at that time he wasn't, but he probably learned about it through the network and some people we knew, and there is some institutional support there, OEA, the American States Organization, actually, ACNUR, that was another organization, also some international organizations as you guys, as the World Bank, the Ministry of Education. There was someone that had worked with us before that was leading these violence topics, violence at school. And basically, these connections are the ones that have led us to these countries. And we have been to Mexico, we have been to Peru, we have been to Chile, directly working with them, but also we have done some work in Costa Rica, El Salvador, Honduras, connected also to research and learning what's happening in topics of education or violence or school violence, Argentina as well, and some other things in different countries that have to do with some talks and workshops that might not imply going beyond to different areas of our region. I wanted to ask something, and it's how would you like people to share about Aulas en Paz? Which things would you say, if I had to talk about Aulas en Paz, what would you like people to know about Aulas en Paz? I'd like you guys to talk about your personal experience. I'm going to give you some examples now that we are with small Aulitas en Paz, small classrooms in peace, because working with kids in preschool level are very different, right? But many of the things that we are doing with Aulitas can be done at later stages, like with older students. And one of the things that happened a couple of months ago, I don't know exactly when, but one of the persons that worked with us received the testimony of a mother without looking for it that actually told her how she suffered with her little kid every night, because here in Bogota, that is a cold city and that children leave school very early. We are used to taking showers at night, and taking showers at night has this myth that you cannot go to bed with hair wet, and this mother used a hair blower, and the kid was having difficulties. It was a challenging situation. where the kid
tensión,
had
un
some difficulties,
problema y
where
entonces después
kids
como que
know that
ya,
there's
ya
going to
me
be
toca
some
hacer esto y seguramente se nos
tension,
va a dar
that
conflicto.
children
Y hay un
know that
personaje
there's going
principal,
to
se
be
llama
some conflict,
Chango.
and there is
Chango lo que le
a
enseña a los niños
character
es
in
respiración
Aulas and
abdominal,
Paz
que
that is,
es un buen
we
ejemplo
have a
de
character
cómo
called
esto puede
Chango. He
aterrizarse en algo
teaches
para ser inofensivo.
breathing
Es bien
from the
distinto
abdomen,
decirle al niño
and
cálmate,
it's very different to say to
además
the boy,
usualmente con un
calm
tono de
down.
regañón, de
Usually, it
juicio,
kind of like
de
scolding
decirle,
them,
mira, a veces uno siente
judging
cosas y
them,
cuando siente
saying
cosas puede hacer
instead,
esto
hey,
y
sometimes we
hacer,
feel some
nunca
things, and
volverlo
when this
realidad. Y
happens, we can
entrar a
do
los
this.
niños pequeños además a
And
volverlo
for
realidad es
small
verlo y tocarlo.
children, turning it
Entonces
into a
también el
reality, seeing
muñeco,
it
el
and touching it. So
peluche, ese
having
mico que además le
this
pone uno en la
stuffed
barriga,
animal that is like the
tenemos el
monkey with the
audiocuento, que es
hand in the
audiovisual, que es allá
belly,
es donde
and we
estamos
also have this
repitiendo,
audiobook
y el
that
niño
is
por
very interesting.
autónomamente le
And
dijo, mamá,
the
tranquila,
kid
porque en
on
el
their own
colegio
told the mother,
estamos
"Hey, mom,
viendo
don't
algo
worry.
que me va a servir.
At
Y le
school,
dijo,
we are
Chango
learning
me enseñó a
something that is
respirar,
going
entonces
to be
tranquilo, dame un
useful.
momento.
Chango
Y
taught me
comenzó a respirar
how
como Chango y
to
le dijo,
breathe."
listo, ahora sí, mamá,
And
suéltame el pelo. Y
he started
se le
actually breathing
secó
like Chango,
sin
and then
necesidad
she
de
could
tener
actually
todo lo que había
dry
pasado.
the
Eso
hair
para
of
mí
this kid, and
trasciende
they
cualquier
had
paper
good results.
académico,
So this, for
presentaciones
me,
en
actually
congresos,
overcomes any kind of
cosas
paper,
más,
academic
más
paper, congress,
acartonadas,
whatever you
porque eso
have,
tiene una conexión con la
because
vida
this
muy, muy
has a connection
significativa.
with real life that
Entonces,
is
a mí me
amazing.
gustaría que se
So
compartiera,
I'd
¿sí?
like this to be
Entonces,
shared.
si quieren hablar de aulas
So
en paz,
if you'd like to
primero
talk about
úsenlo, por
aulas en
favor. Si
paz,
no les sirve, me cuentan
so first use
y
it.
recibimos quejas y reclamos. Pero si les sirve,
First of all,
cuéntenle a
we can
otros
receive
para que otros
some
lo puedan usar,
complaints.
porque no, para
You
eso
can tell
trabajamos,
others
para
as
que lo
well,
que
because
hacemos
that's what we
se
work
use.
for.
Y ahí es
So
donde
what we
creo que
do
estaría
is something
realmente
you
como el
actually
éxito
like.
de compartir esto.
So this would be successful then, so we can share this.
Te iba a preguntar, primero,
Now, I
quería
was going
preguntar
to
por
ask,
toda la
first
raza,
of all,
¿cuántas
I wanted
personas
to
han
make a
calmado
comment. Of
cuando
course,
decís calma?
how many people have
Últimamente
calmed down
muy
when
pocos en el
you say
grupo.
calm down?
Em,
Very
pero te iba a
little, if
preguntar
not zero.
sobre,
But I was actually going to ask.
ya han pasado 20 años, no es menor,
It's been 20 years.
como
It's
habíamos
not
igual
a
por ahí
little
salido
time,
de
right?
la
When we
sesión.
discussed at the beginning
Muy
of the
pocas
session,
experiencias que
we
hayan
have
durado
very little
mucho
experiences that have
tiempo
lasted so
para
long
abordar una
for
problemática en
quite some
específico
time
y
to
además
actually work on a specific
no necesariamente
issue
sean desde el Estado,
and not necessarily
sino
working
también
in
desde
this case
organizaciones,
from
¿no?
the government, but
¿Cómo
actually from
podrías,
organizations.
después de
So
20 años de
after
aprendizaje,
20
¿a dónde
years
van
of
los papás
learning,
ahora?
where are you going to
Considerando más el contexto
as
regional,
aulas en paz,
¿cómo lo ven?
considering the context that you have
Bueno,
now?
además el contexto regional y el
Well, the
contexto
regional
mundial,
context,
porque ahora estamos en
and
una
actually the
situación
world
muy
context,
difícil por todo el
because we have difficult
sector de
situations,
trabajo
the whole
social está
sector of
muy
social
golpeado
work
por cosas que
has been
todos
hit
aquí
a
saben que
lot
están
by
pasando,
things that you will
pero que
know
van
that
más
are
allá
taking
de,
place,
van
but
más allá de
that
decisiones políticas
go actually
específicas.
beyond
Es todo un
specific
movimiento
political
hacia
decisions. It's a
ideas en
whole
el mundo
movement
que no
towards
son tan
ideas in the
chéveres
world that are not so
y como
nice,
a volver
and
sobre esas maneras de pensar
going
estos
back
temas que
to
sabemos que
some
no
ways of
funcionan y que
thinking
son muy
these
tratadas.
things that we know that
Me
don't
hiciste
work
pensar en
and that
algo
are challenging.
de
You
por
made
qué
me think
nosotros nos
about
hemos
something that is
sostenido, porque
why we have
no es tan,
kept up
si
with
es
this.
realmente bien
Um,
raro, o sea,
it's
y
kind of
además,
weird,
pues claro, todo el
honestly.
tiempo
And
sufrimos
of
con
course,
sostenernos y
we are
con
always
mantener,
suffering
pero
with
hay varias
the
cosas que creo que
maintaining
nos han
ourselves.
ayudado.
But there
La
are some
primera
things that
es
have actually helped us.
tener ese
And
vínculo con la
the
universidad y
first
el
thing
origen
is having this connection with the
académico,
university
un
and
grupo
this
de
kind of
investigación
academic
produciendo
origin and a
conocimiento y
research group producing
conectándose
knowledge
desde allí
and
con el mundo,
connecting
para
from
aulas
there
en
with
paz ha sido muy
the
importante.
world
Entonces,
for Aulas
como
and Paz
que
has been
los
amazing.
congresos, las
So these
evaluaciones, la
congresses, these
presentación, como
evaluations, this presentation,
grupo
how
académico
this
y
academic
esta
group
comunicación en ese lenguaje hace
um,
que haya una pata de sostenibilidad
makes it
grande.
so it
Pero
generates some
también estar
sustainability
por
that
fuera
is
de eso.
huge.
Si Aulas en Paz
But
estuviera en
also
la
being outside of
universidad y
this,
solamente estuviera
if
hablando con
Aulas in
académicos,
Paz
no se habría
was
sostenido.
only talking
Es
with
también
academic
salir
people,
y entonces ser una organización
it
fuera de la
wouldn't have
universidad,
maintained. So
creo que
being
nos
an
ha
organization outside
permitido
of the university
tener una relación
has allowed
directa
us to
con
have
las
a
personas, con
direct
los
connection with
territorios y
the
con la
people, with the
diversidad,
territories and
con el
diversity,
sector social, con
with
otras
the
ONGs,
social
con organizaciones
sector, with other
comunitarias, con el
NGOs,
mundo de
with
la
community
financiación, con
organizations, with the
cómo
financial
se
world,
lleva esto a otros
how
lados.
to
Y la
take these to
tercera
other
pata que nos ha
places.
ayudado es la incidencia,
And the third
porque es
thing
el
that
haber
has helped us is incidents. So Aulas en Paz has been working almost in everything that has happened in Colombia, we have connected to education for peace, convivence, and evaluation. These three things has made it so Aulas and Paz as a group, as an organization, is very different. Where are we going? Well, a very good question. First of all, we are in a moment of diversifying what we do and what we know. We went from several years being this program Aulas en Paz with this multi-component program. Um, we're still the same, but we are more than before. So actually, we work uh, willingly to other lines of work. We have leadership lines, network construction. We designed a hub, a Latin American hub of preventing school violence. We participated in different networks because not only the work with educational communities has to do with this, but also participation with World Dialogue through and about these topics and everything that happens here. And within getting to school, we are moving towards building some materials that are not only open and available, but also flexible and different. So what we are building for these aulitas, small classrooms, is an idea of more of a toolbox and not like a rigid curriculum. We have some didactic sequences, but it's not this idea of we do it class after class like this, but it's more about this is something we learn on a daily basis, and we should have materials and tools that go to routines and simple things, even like greeting on a daily basis, other people, how we face the lack of discipline, how I make it so the students pay attention in class and they are not so noisy. So we have very interesting things there. We are developing new things and developing new materials that are going to be available, of course. So you can wait for them, expect them. Most of these are for preschool and primary school children. So if you have students that are a little older, pre-adolescents or adolescents, teenagers, basically, we have a couple of things and we can guide us where to find this, but our focus is more preschool and primary school, precisely due to this idea of preemption. And also after the pandemic, we have diversified in different topics because social emotional topics is something that we believe and we have a complete bias about it in building peace and in convivence. But social emotional has to do with other things of development like mental health that wasn't available. Um, so it's not possible to avoid this topic because everything that has to do with depression, suicide, and well-being became something that we are working on directly, as well as institutional handling of this topic. And when I talk about institutional handling, this might be understood differently. And it's like, how do we engage this from a disciplinary focus at school, not from the classroom? We in Colombia, we have different routes of handling, but how do we respond, for instance, bullying cases or school violence or some kind of aggression? So we are following up some educational communities from there, learning a lot. And yes, of course, the word would be diversity, scaling, and open materials. These are the things when we decided that what we did was available for free. I believe that we opened our site and we started having a different way to see this.
José Fernando, te voy a hacer una pregunta más
Jose, I'm going to ask another more
pero
personal
muy,
question,
muy importante.
but
¿Hay
in my
alguna
opinion, very
actividad,
important. Do you have
personaje
any
o cuento favorito
activity,
de los materiales?
character, or story that is your favorite from the materials that you have?
Si nos puedes contar un poco.
If
Una
you
de las
could
más
tell me a bit,
famosas es
one of the
Tuga.
most
Tuga
important
nos
is
acompaña
Tuga.
desde hace mucho tiempo
Tuga
y
has been with us for quite
Tuga
some
le
time, and
enseña a los
Tuga
niños a regular sus emociones.
is
La
helping
tortuga que
regulate
vive en ciertas
emotions. The
cosas
children
cuando
is a
tiene
toro,
mucha
tortuga
rapidez, por
in
decirlo así,
Spanish.
seguramente
When
ustedes
she
dicen
is
enojo
angry
o
in
ira, cuando
Colombia,
está muy enojada se
when
mete en
she's
su
angry,
caparazón y los niños hacen
she
una
gets
caparazón así.
within her
Y cuando están
caparas,
dentro
like,
del caparazón,
and
respiran
when she's
bonito,
inside,
respiran,
they
se
start
calman y
thinking about
después salen.
something
O sea, por una
beautiful, then
taquera. Pero
breathe
ahora
and
tenemos
live.
unos
This
super
was a
ejemplos. Tenemos Ivo el
success.
dinosaurio,
And
Dino le
we have
enseña a los
Dino,
niños a
the
decir que no,
dinosaur. Dino teaches children
cuentos
to
y
say
al final
no. There is a
digamos es un
story,
dinosaurio
and
que
he
no,
uses
no es
the
un
voice of a dinosaur
tiranosaurio
is not the
agresivo,
voice of
es
an
un
aggressive
dinosaurio bonachón,
tyrannosaur,
pero es un
but it's a
dinosaurio que
good
también puede ser fuerte
guy
cuando tiene que
dinosaur,
decirla.
but it's
Hay otro
also a
que se
strong
llama
dinosaur
Coro
that
el
can
loro.
establish
Loro creo que le
limits.
decimos en todo
Coro
Latinoamérica,
el
Puerto
loro
Rico.
is another one. Coro the
Y
parrot,
Coro el loro
and
le enseña a los niños a
he
actuar, a ser
teaches
asertivos como
children
Dino,
to be
pero en
assertive
grupo.
like
Entonces, Coro
Dino,
el
but
loro
as a
hace que
group.
los niños
So Coro
lleguen en
Loro
grupo
makes it so
a decirle a
children
los niños basta cuando
um,
se están agrediendo, por ejemplo, cuando hay
goes
una
in
pelea.
groups and
Y eso
tells
es súper
children to stop
impresionante.
when there is
Debe
a
pasar que la
fight.
primera vez
And
que
this
conocí a
is
Loro
amazing.
no
I must
iba a
confess that
funcionar.
the first time that I
Porque
met
yo vengo,
Coro
como
the parrot,
seguramente
I
muchos de
thought it
ustedes, de
was not
pensar
going to
en
work
mi
because
experiencia
I
en el
started
colegio.
thinking
Y mi
about my
experiencia en el
experience
colegio
at
era
school,
como
and my
decir que
experience
cuando
at
hay una
school
pelea todos
was
llegamos
when there
felices
is
a
a
verla.
fight, everyone is
Pero
happy
eso
going
es
there to see it.
cucarachas de
But
adulto. Los
these
adultos, los
are
niños entienden
cockroaches
muy
as
rápidamente
adults.
que cuando hay una
Children
pelea
actually
hay alguien que
understand
la puede
quite
pasar
quickly
mal
when there
y
is a
que
fight,
puede
there
sufrir
is
y ser
someone that can be
maltratado.
a
Y
victim and
entonces
can be
rápidamente se dan cuenta que es
injured.
mejor
And they
frenar. Y
immediately
cuando llegan
realize
en
that
grupo
it's
y dicen
easier
basta,
to stop it. And
es
when they
una
get as a
estrategia
group and say
regulatoria
stop,
súper
this is a
poderosa. Y
self-regulation tool that is
otra cosa que
extremely
usamos que es muy
powerful. And
simple es la
another thing
señal
that
del
we use,
silencio.
very simple,
Pero
is the
detrás
symbol
de
of
esa
silence. But
sencillez más que
behind this
simpleza
simple
hay mucho fondo.
thing,
Porque
there is a lot
casi todos los que
in
hemos trabajado
depth
con niños nos
because
hemos
almost all
enfrentado
of
a
us
un
that
reto
have
y
worked
es,
with
¿usted
children
tiene
have
silencio por ahí
faced
normal
a
que sea? O
challenge
sea,
that is
¿cómo hacer
them being
para
silent,
tener
paying
al grupo
attention,
más o
how to
menos
make it so
ordenado?
the
Y
group is
cuando
kind of
uno llega a
organized.
un salón,
And when we
tiende a
get
hacer algunas de
to
las
a
mismas cosas
classroom,
que es
we
elevar
tend to do the
el
same
volumen de la
things,
voz,
like
comenzar a hablar
increasing the
cada vez
volume
más
of our
fuerte
voice,
y termina
starting
gritando
talking
como
louder, and
grupos
end up
muy
shouting when we
desordenados.
have
Y esto, cuando uno
very
lo ve de afuera,
disorganized
es una
groups.
paradoja
And
impresionante.
this, seeing
Es
it from
decir,
outside, is a
estamos
huge
tratando de enseñar a
paradox,
los
right?
niños a hacer
We are trying
silencio
to
gritándoles.
teach
Pues tómelo como una
children
caricatura, por
to
favor,
be
porque
silent
claramente esto
by
está exagerado,
screaming, right? Like
pero la
shouting.
esencia
Now, of
es
course, this
como
is
la misma, es una
exaggerated, but
paradoja
the
de
essence is the same, like a
cómo, qué
paradox
es lo
of
que realmente aprendo
what
yo
is it that
cuando hay
I
un
actually
adulto que habla
learn
duro y me callo.
when I have an
Aprendo que
adult
si
that is
yo quiero que
speaking
esa
loud
persona
and I shut up? I learned that
me
if I
escuche,
want
yo tengo que hablar
someone
duro.
to hear me, I
Aprendo que el que
have
habla
to
más
speak up,
fuerte es
right?
quien es
To
escuchado.
is
Aprendo
to
que la
shout.
fuerza me
I
lleva a
learned that the
lograr
person that speaks
cosas,
the
que
loudest
esto
is
tan
heard.
difícil,
I
pues uno
learned
no
that
quiere que
strength
seguramente no aprenda.
actually
Entonces
leads
hay
me
otra cosa, hay
to
una
earn
técnica
things.
que es la señal del
So
silencio, que
we
seguramente
have a
muchos
technique that
conocen
is
y
the
usan acá.
sign of
Y es
silence.
en
Many of
lugar
you
de
might know
ponerme
it,
yo a
and is
gritar, que pues
instead
a nadie
of
le gusta,
screaming
a uno
that
no le
or
gusta.
shouting that
Cuando,
we actually
cuando a mí me
don't
ha
like.
tocado gritar con grupos
And I have
es
had to
algo
shout
mal, a
in
los
groups.
niños no
I
les
feel
gusta que les
bad.
griten.
Children don't
Entonces es
like to be
decirles a
shouted
los
at.
niños
So it's saying,
galletitos, como quieran que le digan
look,
ustedes,
guys, however you call them,
cuando lleguemos, por
children,
ejemplo, de recreo
teenagers,
a
or whatever,
descanso y ustedes llegan
when
con mucha
we
energía,
come back
pues vamos a
from
tener un momento en
the
donde necesitamos todos estar
lunch,
mirándolos
then
y
and you
escuchándolos y no es
arrive with a lot
responderles
of
primero,
energy,
escuchen, voy a hacer esta señal.
then we
Hay
need
unos
to
profes que
be
hacen esta,
heard and
otros que hacen
everything.
esta,
There
otros
are
que hacen
some
esta. Y
teachers
lo
that use
que
this
tienen que hacer los
sign,
niños
and
cuando me
from
ven es
others use a
reproducir esa
different one.
señal y ese
And what
silencio.
they
Es
have
fácil.
to do is
Y
to
entonces yo voy
reproduce
en
this
por el
sign
salón
and be
mostrando la
silent.
señal, los
So I
niños se
go
van callando, van
through
haciendo el
the
silencio y
classroom,
cuando todos estamos
showing the
callados,
sign,
ahí sí
and
hablo
when
duro.
everyone is silent, I start
Y esto
talking and
que
I can
realmente
start
es muy
class.
simple,
And this
tiene una
is something
profundidad muy
very simple,
grande
but it has a
y
huge
realmente
depth
una visión
and actually
pedagógica
a pedagogical
transformadora
vision that
completamente
can
opuesta al rol.
transform completely opposite to the others.
En el rol del profesor
Mm,
cuando estamos gritando
In
es
the
de
role of the
yo
professor,
tratando
when
de
we are
manejar la disciplina
screaming or
por mi
shouting, I'm
autoridad y más que
handling
poder,
discipline
mi
with my
autoridad.
authority,
En
more
el
my
otro lado
power than
estoy yo
authority.
ejerciendo mi
On the
autoridad,
other
pero
side,
haciendo
I'm
que el grupo se
exercising authority,
autorregule
but
y los
making it
niños
so the
aprenden que
group
pueden cambiar
self-regulates and
y que
children learn that they
finalmente es
can
el
change,
silencio lo que puede buscar
that is
silencio
actually
y que
silence,
toman
would can
decisiones que afectan
get
a
silence,
todos
and that
y
they
que
have
todos
decision
fuercen como
making
una
that
decisión
affects
para
everyone,
estar
and that
mejor.
everyone can make a
Y
decision so
eso
we are
es
better.
apenas una cosita
And this
chiquita.
that is something
Claramente hay
very
muchas
small,
otras
and
cosas
that
que
clearly we
hacemos.
have other
Para mí es
things that
muy
we do,
transformador.
for me is
Transformador para el aprendizaje
a
de los
very
niños,
well changing,
para
is transforming for the well-being of the children, the environment, transforming for myself, because I do things that are actually more beneficial for me and that actually care for me and that gives me more a feeling of well-being. But I could stay here talking about these things, but well, now we are going to go to the most interesting section, that is where we receive some questions from the audience. Some of these are difficult, let me tell you. But there is one that is very interesting that has to do also with these 20 years of Aulas in past. And during these 20 years, the world has changed a lot and very fast. From the eruption of the digital media, the pandemic, going through obviously the artificial intelligence and the transformations that are changing the way in which we learn. And some colleagues are asking in the chat, well, how do you handle online learning in the context of aulas en paz? How do you think about this? And in this question about online, we also have, for example, digital violence. This is the first question. Yeah, of course, without a question, of course, this has been an issue for quite some time. But after the pandemic, yeah, it actually blew in on our faces, to say it in a way. So what we've done is to start trying to move what we have learned and not generalizing it, but transferring it to the online world, because it's different without a doubt. For instance, cyberbullying is different to to the face-to-face bullying, because basically any aggression that involves technology becomes more complex than the aggressions that we might have face-to-face. And this complexity actually matches with the definition of bullying, because it's something repetitive, systematic, that actually generates some disbalance of power. The person that is always affected has this condition of vulnerability, and this happens almost automatically whenever I am an object of aggression through the use of technology. So in here we have a focus very similar to the one that we have in place, but handled online. So for instance, one of the things that we do very important is the development of empathy in the face of people that have been affected. So empathy can be developed with the person that I see there. Also, when I see someone posting something, the empathy is not the same. However, there is a common base where we started thinking about how to develop empathy in general, but also moving this to the online contexts, because empathy tends to be less felt. I feel more empathy when I see someone crying next to me, but when I don't see them, when I have to anticipate, like, hey, how can this person feel? This is more complex. So in there, we have kind of to make sure that we make visible this empathy and some of the things that can neutralize this. And there is another one very important, that is assertivity, acting to defend the person in need or stopping my behavior. And these could be online assertivity with concrete and clear examples. Once again, I tell you, this is not calm down. This is not you have to be assertive and kind. Yeah, of course, it's important to say this. However, this is something that needs to be concrete. So we have short workshops with children where we see some chats on their screen, and we have a chat. We are reading this in WhatsApp, Snapchat, and all these new networks are born and die all the time. So we are almost instantly lacking some updates. But the idea is so children learn what can they do, how can they answer, how can they face this aggression to themselves and others, what is it that they cannot do, and in this way also teaching adults. There are some things here that I believe that are very important, and is that we as adults might not be aware of the risk that this has. It's like giving a gun to my 6-year-old son or daughter, or if I took my very young child to the worst neighborhood in the city, and that they had to go back to school on their own. So something similar happens when I don't have filters and restrictions for the use of technology. When I give a cell phone to a kid at an age that they shouldn't have it, when they are accessing some difficult situations that put them at risk that are similar to the other, it seems dramatic, but it actually isn't. It's actually similar to what happens there. and
Cristian,
we
no, pero todos lo
lower
sienten y
this. We say,
cometemos los
hey,
mismos
everyone
delitos
has
con el
it. My
celular.
son
Si fuera un arma, la
is making me
comprarían. O sea,
crazy
si todos los
because he
estudiantes de
wants
tu
a cell
salón
phone.
tuvieran un arma
So if
y ahí te
every
dijeran
student at
que se la
school had a
se
gun
la
and your
comprarías,
son or daughter
quizás
asked you
no.
for a gun, would you
Hay que
buy it for
tener
them?
como una
Probably
llegada
not,
desde las
right? So we
familias
need to have
para ver qué
some
hacemos con eso.
imaging from the family so we learn how to
José
deal
Fernando,
with this.
ahí una
Jose
pregunta
Fernando,
también
there is a question also there
ligada
connected
a
to
la incidencia y
the
ahí tú
incidents.
mencionaste que uno de los
And
elementos
you
que
mentioned that one
destacarías
of
a
the elements
destacar
that you would highlight from
sería
Aulas in Paz
encontrar
is that
diferentes puntos
you
de
have
encuentro
had
entre
to
varios
find
agentes del sistema
different
que le ha dado
entering
sostenibilidad
points. And this
a
is
los
what
edificios
probably
institucionales
has
que hacemos.
provided sustainability to the
La pregunta
organization
es
and
sobre esa
their
incidencia porque a veces muchas
actions. I wanted to ask about
han
the
logrado
incidents because
influir en el
from the public
currículum
they are
de,
asking
por
if
ejemplo,
you
de
have
educadores
influenced
o
the
justamente
curriculum
en
of
su
training
rol
of
hacia
educators, but
directamente
perhaps not
desde el
only the
currículum
curriculum
escolar.
them, but
Entonces, esa es
also
una
the
pregunta
curriculum
que
at
tenía.
school. So this is a question that they are asking.
Sí, 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 sí. Entonces, Colombia no
Well,
tiene
yes,
currículo,
Colombia
pero
does
los
not have
estándares de
a standard
competencia
curriculum,
ciudadana
but the
son
standards
justamente lo que el
of
Ministerio de Educación pone
convivence
sobre
there
la
are
mesa sobre
the
lo que los
ones that are
estudiantes tienen que
established by
aprender o
the
no,
Ministry
y
of
los
Education
estándares que ya
about what
tienen
the students
más de
have to
20
learn or
años
not, and the
han sido
standards
una
that
guía
are more than 20
criticada,
years old have been a
mejorable,
guideline,
claro que sí, no hay nada
criticized, it
perfecto en
can
este
be
mundo
improved. Of course,
y hay
nothing is
cosas
perfect
que
in the
esto
world,
que
and
podría
there are
ser
some
mejor, pero
things
esta
that
guía
can
se ha
be
convertido
improved,
realmente en
but
un
this
referente muy
guideline has
importante
become
y
a
también
very
muy
important
sorprendente
reference
porque las
and
políticas
very
educativas en
impressive
general, las
because
políticas,
educational
todas las
policies,
educativas
well,
tienden
or
a
in general all
aparecer y a
policies, but
morir rápido, ¿no?
educational
Entonces
tend
como
to
que
appear and
hablamos hoy
disappear
de
very
algo y
quick.
pasado
So
mañana
we are
hablamos de
talking
otra
about
cosa.
something
Los
here
estándares
now,
siguen vigentes
and
y
the
deben
day
seguir vigentes, con
after
todos los
tomorrow,
problemas que
then
ustedes
we
quieran
have
agregar,
different things. So these
pero
standards
siguen
are still
vigentes y eso ha hecho
active.
que Colombia
These
desarrolle
have
una suerte
has made it
de
so
lenguaje común
that Colombia generates some
sobre
kind of
estos
common
temas.
language
Está la
about
cátedra de
these
paz. En la
topics. We
cátedra
have
de
the
paz hicimos
peace
unos lineamientos que están
teaching.
disponibles
We
también.
generated
Me
some
acuerdo que
guidelines that are available. Policies that
me
I
dijeron antes de
were
eso
not
que
showing
por
it. They
favor
told
compartiera
me
los
before
listos
this
de
to
los
please
estados de
share the
inicio. No se me
links of
ocurrió,
what I
pero
was
los
going to talk
mandamos
about, and
después.
I forgot about
Pero
this one, but
la
we are going
cátedra
to
de
send
paz
it
tiene
later.
lineamientos
But this
generales y una
peace
malla de aprendizajes por grados
teaching has
y una
different
secuencia didácticas
um,
de ejemplo que
courses
muestra.
per
Entonces le dije a
different
los
levels,
maestros, mira,
and
esto más o menos
it
tiene estos
tells the
qués y lo que
teachers
se debe
basically we
preguntar
have
por
this
edad puede ser más o
what's
menos
what
esto
needs to
y
be
lo que se
learned
puede hacer es
in
más o menos esto, con ejemplos
each
concretos. No puede,
grade
no,
is
no con
this,
recetas
and what you have
mecánicas
to
de
do
cuento, sino
is
con
this, like with some
opciones de cómo
examples,
hacerlo
with
y eso
some options of
definitivamente
how to
creo
do it, not
que
with
sería.
magic
Entonces yo
bullets or
siento que
silver
hemos tenido un
bullets.
impacto
So I
muy
feel that we
grande
have had
con
a
obviamente
very
las
interesting
limitaciones que
impact
tienen todas estas
with
cosas y
obviously
es
the
que aunque los
limitations that we
estándares tienen
might have
20
with all of
años,
this, and
no
even though the
sorprendería que tú llegues
standards
a una
have
escuela en
are 20
Colombia
years
donde
old,
digan qué es
it
eso.
wouldn't be
Y uno
surprising
dice,
if you
pero ¿cómo
get
puede
to a
pasar?
school in
Pero
Colombia
sí,
where they
realmente ha
say,
habido
"What's
una
that?"
apropiación de este tema.
But yeah,
Y
there
también,
has been
pues
some
la
good
UNESCO aquí ha
appropriation
tenido un
about
rol
this, and
de
UNESCO has
acompañamiento al
had
Ministerio de
a role
Educación que
of
tendrán que
accompaniment of
mencionar
the Ministry of
con
Education
APSIU
that
y
we have
con
to
la
mention with
ciudadanía
FCU and
global,
the
donde ha habido
global
programas
citizenship, where we
específicos de
have
ver
had specific
cómo tiene
programs
esto
of
relación con la
getting and
formación
seeing
de
how this is
maestros.
connected
Y ahí hay
with
trabajo con las
teachers
escuelas
training, and
normales
we have
que
been
me
working with
parece
normal
que es
schools
clave. O sea,
that I believe
cada vez
that
estamos
is
más
key.
convencidos de que la
Each
formación de
time we are more
maestros,
convinced that
no tanto en
training
ejercicio, sino los futuros
professors and
maestros,
teachers, not only
es
in
un
exercise,
punto
but
bien
actually the future
importante que
ones,
tiene que
are
ver
a
con
very
esta
important
idea de
point
prevenir
that
temprano,
might
no
have to do
solo
with
con los
this
niños,
idea
sino
of
también con
parenting
los
early, not
adultos
only
y
with
los futuros
kids,
padres,
but
por
also
ejemplo.
with adults,
Trabajar
future parents, for
con
instance,
personas que todavía no son
working with
papás,
people that are
con
not
los
parents yet,
adolescentes en su
with
posible rol de
adolescents
padres
in
y
their
madres.
possible role as
Eso puede ser
parents.
una idea súper
This might
poderosa para
be
no
a very
esperar que
powerful
uno ya
idea,
esté
so we
cometiendo los
don't
errores que
wait
todos los
to
padres
be making
cometemos,
the mistakes
sino
that we as
que nos
parents make
vayamos
always,
preparando y
but
vayamos
actually
desarrollando
being
estas
ready
habilidades.
and start developing these abilities early.
Fernando, y ahí
Jose
otra cosa
Fernando,
sobre
and there is
ese,
another
digamos, la
question
pregunta
that we
importante y
have,
probablemente más
very
importante que
important and
nosotros podemos
interesting
tocar,
question, more
es,
important than
bueno,
ever in
¿qué
the
pasa
current
con las
context that
intervenciones
we have,
cercanas a la
and is
a la
what
escuela,
happens with these
pero en el
interventions that are
contexto
guided to the school and are given in territorial, very complex contexts. And this might be the reality of several of the schools in our region. Sadly, the last statistics show that we have a terrible scenario in regards to the interaction and community of schools and how schools in the territories have these situations. But one of the questions they ask is, well, How do we intervene in this context where does it look very difficult not to think in school within this space? Another question that is connected with this has to do with how do we connect aulas en paz with this, beyond this. And there are some other indications there, but I'm going to leave you with these questions. Well, an important part is that we are not alone. It's not about how Aulas en Paz arrives, but it's who we go with and how. And one of the things that we do in territories where we arrive, especially the more challenging ones, are first providing some mapping of who is present in this territory. And when I'm asking who, this has to do with social organizations, and with the work recognized international organizations that might have programs in the place, a church, community, and humanitarian organizations, young people organizations, and this generates some trust and the connection with all these stakeholders, where it's almost vital to start having this kind of connection, this kind of tissue, this weaving, so we can get to these territories. I would not even say difficult, but actually impossible and very risky. Risky for ourselves arriving and also risky for the people that are within the territory. There is a challenge here, and is that many of these territories might have some situations that they are facing.
Algo que ellos sienten que decirles lo que tienen que hacer. Entonces, es muy
Something is
importante
happening here.
llegar
Just
con
one
una
second.
construcción
But
realmente
we need
colectiva
to
y con
have
algo
a
donde se
collective
construya
construction
junto con ellos
and a
y
way
no
in which
simplemente
we
se
build together
llevaron
with
para
them, and we
quedar.
are not only
Y
giving
pues
something
hay
so
algo
they
muy
do.
concreto es,
And
nosotros tratamos siempre de contratar
something very
gente en
concrete
territorio. No
is
llegar con
to hire someone
funcionarios o
from the
colaboradores de
territory,
Aulas en Paz que llegan
and
desde
not
las
only
capitales de
reaching
estas zonas
with
aisladas,
workers and
sino
people
ver
that
que
are
las
coming from the
personas que
capital to these
nosotros
isolated
contratemos en las más
places,
cercanas a este
but
tipo de
trying to have
territorios.
these
Y
people
otra
that are
cosa
close to the.
es que claramente nosotros llegamos con un pedazo del
And
problema,
another
¿no?
thing is that
Entonces
we
llegamos
have
con
some side
formación
of the issue, right?
socioemocional en
We're
primaria y
solving
en
this.
preescolar,
We
porque
are
hemos trabajado
arriving with
otras
the
cosas
social
con
emotional
control. Ese es
teaching
nuestro
in primary
énfasis.
school
Y
and
eso
preschool.
claramente
As I
no es
mentioned,
todo
we
lo que
worked in other
queda y
things,
ahí hay que aliarse con personas
but
que saben hacer
this is what we're
cosas. Esto
focusing
es
on, and we
bien
have
importante.
to ally
Pero
with other
lo de los
people and
artistas plásticos,
organizations that
todo
are
también
doing
es clave.
some other
Entonces,
things.
en todos los temas
Partnerships
de
with other
bienestar
sectors
visual, por
are
ejemplo,
key in
las
everything that
secretarías de
has to do with
educación en temas de
well-being,
convivencia, cuando
education,
ya hay agresiones
secretaries in regards
o
to
se llega a
convivence when we
violencia.
have aggression and we
Colombia
reached
tenemos la Policía de
violence. In
Infancia y
Colombia, we have the
Adolescencia, la Fiscalía,
police
el
of
Instituto
children
Nacional de
and
Bienestar
teenagers,
Familiar. Todas
the
estas organizaciones
General
tienen que
Prosecutor's
poner
Office
límites.
and General
Lamentablemente
Attorney
ellos saben
Office.
que esto no es justamente lo que uno ve siempre,
Sadly, we
pero
don't always have
sí tratamos de que esto se
the best
engranaje
solution every time, but we
funcionen
try
y es
so these
mezclar sueños. O
cogs,
sea, yo
these
creo que
gears work together
muchas veces nos
and
preguntan,
not to be
¿qué hace
alone.
Aulas en Paz con este tipo de cosas? Y la
How do
respuesta
we deal
es,
with aulas and
pues,
pass with these kind of
usted
things?
sabe, o sea, no es Aulas quien responde
So
a
the
eso,
important thing
sino
is to
es
ally
construir
with the people
vínculos
that
con las
knows. It's
personas de la
actually not
comunidad,
aulas, but
con
it's
las
actually creating
organizaciones que están
connections with the
allí.
people in the
Y son
community
los
and
que
the
realmente
organizations
pueden
present there.
definir
There are
estas
the
cosas.
ones that can actually face these kind of
Y voy
situations.
a ir cerrando, pero quedan todavía preguntas, entonces voy a
And I'm going
plantear
to close now,
cinco
but we
preguntas.
still have questions. I'm going to
Me
try to
preguntan
gather a couple of
sobre
them. So
algo que tú
they are
mencionaste,
asking
que era el
about
ciclo de
something that you
capacitación
mentioned
con el
with this
ejemplo
example of
de
Tuga,
algunos
the
personajes
total,
claves que
and the
forman
example
parte
of
de los
some
materiales de
key
aulas en paz,
characters that are part
que
of
es
these materials
usualmente
of Aulas
vinculado
en
a un
Paz that is
proxeneta
usually
de las experiencias de violencia
studying in like an
en
adult
contextos
of these
educativos, ¿no?
experiences of
Estas
violence
experiencias
in
pueden ser
educational
tanto de
contexts.
violencia
Many
como
times when we think about
interpretaciones de los
violence, we
adultos,
think about the
de los adultos
interpretations
ante
that
las
we have as
víctimas. Y
adults
eso
about
obviamente
violence,
establece una
and
brecha
this
importante
obviously
para pensar
establishes
soluciones.
an important
Pero
gap
durante
so
los
we can
procesos
think
educativos
about
también hay
solutions,
otros
because at the end,
procesos.
solutions end up being
Eso por un lado.
adult
Entonces,
centered.
una de las
This
preguntas
on the
que
one
surgen
hand, so
aquí
one of the
desde la
questions
audiencia es,
that they
bueno,
asked,
¿cómo
or the audience
abordar el
asked,
problema del
was how to
adultocentrismo
face
en la
this
producción de
adult
los materiales,
centered
¿no?
in the production
Esa es
of the
una
materials.
parte.
This is one
También
very
preguntaba tal
important
vez como
question
ella,
and very
es
well connected with this. is that in many occasions we talk about violence at school as if it were an interruption of what traditionally happens at school. And in here I'm going to make reference of some member states that we were reflecting about this, that in some occasions actually education reproduces this through relationships, through the hierarchy and the power relations. So, and a lot to do also with these focuses of adult-centered situations. I wanted to ask about this, whether in Aulas and Paz you have reflected about it, and how to intervene in contexts where many times it's the system itself that is reproducing certain structural violences that is not only outside but also inside of this.
No, lo del
Yes, of
adultocentrismo
course.
es una
This
realidad y es un reto.
adultcentrism is a reality and it's
Yo que
actually a
tengo 60
challenge.
años, cada vez
I
me
am
siento
already
menos
50
joven,
years
entonces
old. I
soy
feel
realmente una viejita
the,
grande que hay que
the
reconocer.
kind of say
Entonces yo siento que uno
older
tiene que ser
every
muy
time,
consciente
but there is
realmente
a
de
gap
su
that we need
mirada
to
y es
understand and
distinta a la de
recognize.
los
It's
niños y los
important to
jóvenes
see that
y
the way we
que
see
esté
things is
complementada.
different than the
Bueno,
young people and needs to be
recuerde que
complemented.
nuestro
Please
grupo
remember
es primaria y
that our
preescolar y esto lo
group
hace bien
is
distinto que si
preschool
estuviéramos
and primary school
trabajando
and is
con jóvenes
different
o con
than
adolescentes,
working
¿no?
with young people or
Entonces, por
teenagers.
ejemplo, cuando estamos trabajando con niños
So, for
pequeños,
instance, when we work
tratamos,
with
de hecho,
younger
ahora
people,
muchos de nuestros
we
personajes
try,
han
many of our
sido
characters have been
construidos por
mm,
niños, o sea,
created by children, actually.
niños cercanos,
These
los
are
colaboradores, los
children that are,
asistentes
I don't know,
pilotarios,
the
que nos
children of our
ayudan a
collaborators,
construir estos
children within the
personajes.
pilots, help us
Y
build
además
these characters.
tratamos de
And
que nuestras
we also
habilidades
tried so
no sean
our
como, no tengan un
abilities
mensaje moralista de esto es lo
don't
que
have
tienes que
this
hacer,
moral
sino
message
es
of
más
this is
bien
what you have
qué
to
es lo que
do,
tú quieres
but
hacer
instead
con
is
esto y mira,
what
eso
is
es
it
lo que
that you
siento.
want to do with this and check if this
Por
works for
ejemplo,
you.
aulas en
So,
paz, esperaría yo,
aulas
de
in
pronto si
paz, I
nos
would
saliera algo de
say,
oro en el
I don't
currículum,
know,
no
sometimes
debería haber
something
nada que
appears,
le
but in
diga
the
a los niños que
curriculum, we shouldn't
agredirse
have
está mal
something that
o
tells
que no
people
tienen que
that
agredirse. No porque yo no crea eso, sino porque no
attacking
tiene
each
ningún
other is
sentido decirlo,
wrong,
eso no tiene ningún valor
or that they
pedagógico, son
shouldn't attack
mentiras,
each
son de
other
algunos,
because
pero
it doesn't
queda muy
have
en lo
a full
superficial.
pedagogical
Lo que
value.
tratamos de hacer es que los
Might,
niños
might have some
piensen,
value, but it's not
sientan y
full.
actúen sobre eso,
I
sobre sus
know
propios
that
problemas y sus propias
at a
visiones
certain
de qué es lo que
point
les pasa. Eso es bien difícil,
it
es
might
fácil
generate some
decirlo,
positive
pero
value,
siento
but
yo
it's
que
not
es
full there.
también
I
como
feel that is
un error
also like a
y una trampa
mistake to do it like this and
sentir
kind
que
of
yo estoy
cheating,
hablando por los
feeling that I
derechos de
am
los niños.
speaking in the name of children or
Es un
young
error
people.
ese.
This is a huge
Entonces
mistake in
tendríamos más
itself.
es que traer
So
a los
we would
niños y
have
preguntarles
actually to bring children
alguien
and
que
ask
sabe
them,
de eso.
hey, so we know,
Pero lo intentamos, de golpe tenemos que intentarlo
but
más,
we
eso sí, yo
tried,
creo
we
que
might have to try it more.
partimos de pensar esto muy
I
desde el
believe
mundo
that
adulto
we
y
think this from
desde
an
hace unos años
adult
hemos
point
tratado
of
de
view,
abrirnos más
and
y de
from a couple of
construirlo
years
junto con
before, we
jóvenes, no
have opened
solamente a
ourselves to
validarlo,
build it with
sino a
young people, not only
construirlo con
validation
niños y
of this,
jóvenes,
but actually
y
building
ahí
it
vamos.
together
Y
with
siento que
children
ahí
and young
tenemos
people,
que trabajar más.
and
Y lo otro, perdón
we
porque se me
have to work
olvidó,
more on that.
iba a comenzar incluso por la otra parte de
I
la
was
pregunta, pero se
actually
me olvidó.
going to start with this part, but I
No sé
forgot
si
the
te
second part of
acuerdas.
the question. Could you please remind me? I'm sorry. It had to do with how to intervene in contexts where we have structural violence, and we
Sí.
have a couple of examples that are going to be given by participants in the chat. In some cases, they mention the presence of gangs, organized crime, criminal structures that are operating in some territories and at the same time. So, yeah, it's like how to intervene in these contexts, and if you have asked about it in the
Sí,
context
sí,
of aulas en
hicimos,
paz.
de hecho
Yes,
hemos estado
actually, we
en
have
una gran
been
experiencia de aulas en paz en
in
colegios
this.
públicos, en contextos
We
vulnerables y
have
con
had this
violencia,
in public
no vulnerables por
contexts
otra
due
cosa. Entonces hemos
to
estado en lugares complejos, con microtráfico,
we
con
have been
pandillas,
in complex areas with
ahí, por
microtraffic,
ejemplo,
gangs,
nuestra
and others.
aproximación no
But
es
in
directa
there,
sobre el tema,
the
porque
way we
casi siempre
approach this is
trabajamos
not
con niños
directly on the
pequeños
topic
y
because
aunque los
many
niños
times we
pequeños
work
están cada vez
with
más
little
involucrados
children,
en
and even
esto,
though they are more
nosotros no
involved each
tenemos una
time,
incidencia directa y un
we
trabajo
don't
específico, por
have
ejemplo, en la
a
prevención del
direct
pandillismo,
effect and a specific
pero
work in
lo que
regards
sí
to
hacemos
prevention
es, a
of
través del
gangs.
desarrollo
But what we do
socioemocional, a
is through
través de la
this
construcción de
socio-emotional
ambientes de
work
aprendizaje
and through
distintos,
building these
dar la
different
posibilidad de
learning learning environments, providing a possibility of having different worlds where the children can realize that there are different ways to connect. And this, for me, it might not be complete, but for me, it's a huge transformation. If I come from a family where what they've done is to attack me all the time, and I am in a neighborhood where we have power structures, and I'm getting involved with a group that has certain structures, some childrens that are used as human males to carry, I don't know, drugs or something, or older children that are connected with direct violence, facing different gangs and criminal groups. This from our aulas in past goes beyond ourselves. We don't have a way to deal with this directly. We have done a couple of things, but it's not our core. What we have done that I believe that is important but might not be enough is to provide an opportunity so these children actually live different things. And this is not easy because what happens sometimes is that this is reproduced like the cycles that we need to break. So I'm going to try to provide a simple example, but once I was training some teachers in abilities for conflict resolution, and the teacher said, wait a second, you might not know this context, but in here, the younger people are coming from gangs. So what you are saying sounds very nice, but in here, we cannot do it that way. And they gave me a nice example about a kid, a young guy that had a cap. And I know that we have a name for this in Spanish, in Colombian Spanish, and young teacher said, hey, you need to remove it. We might have some issues there. And this child, this adolescent, ended up standing up to the professor, and this teacher actually had to leave this place. And the coordinator had to get there, and the coordinator was nice, was intelligent guy. He was involved in a reverse structure where he started threatening the children using the same words that they used with the people of the gangs, even threatening them with physical abuse and saying if necessary, if they had to fight, so they would need to learn that in that school things were not done in that way, that he was willing to do so, to use violence. And children, clearly, because they come from this context, reacted in the face of this in the same way as they do on the streets. So the one with the most power and the ones that makes me afraid is the one that wins. And this generated an idea within the professor saying, hey, this is the way to handle this. This is how we do things here. And it's not that I am the smartest, but the thing is that we always have a distance that lets us see things that we cannot otherwise. So the privilege of distance allowed me to see that what was happening there was worse, was actually reproducing the dynamics of gang relations, but justified with the institution. So this happening at school is the worst. This is what I learned at school with my teachers is the worst. So there is a basic idea for me, and is that we need to stop this and actually promote different ways to connect and learn that actually shows children and teenagers that there are other ways, because violence is extremely naturalized there. And people believe that this is the right way because violence has an utilitarian way. If I shout someone, they might listen to me, but this doesn't make it good. The bad thing about violence is not that it works, but it's actually that it affects human dignity, right? So utilitarianism is not important there, and this has a very good uh, thing that what the theoreticals call teaching styles. And how do I build some areas where I have authority
y
where
yo logro
authority is
ser
not based on
cercano
fear,
y
but is
firme
real
al mismo
respect,
tiempo.
and I can be
Si
close
vivimos en
and
un
firm
ambiente
at the same time,
democrático en
generating
donde
a
hayan
democratic
normas y se
space where
cumplan,
we
porque
have
eso es
rules
vital,
and they are
hayan
followed because
límites donde
this
la
is
gente
vital.
tenga que
There are
cumplir,
limits where
pero
people
que
need
eso
to
además
comply,
tenga una
but
relación
this
amable y
also
cercana de
needs to
cuidado.
have
Y para eso
a
hay
close
técnicas
relationship
y
of care.
para
And for
eso
this, we
se
have
aprenden cosas
techniques, and there is where
de
we
cómo
learn
hacerlo. Y creo
ways
yo
in
que
which
eso es
we learn
parte
how to
importante
do
de
it.
romper
And I believe that
esos
this
ciclos.
is an important part of breaking these
Con
cycles.
esa frase que
And
emula
with this
esta serie de webinars que
last
estás
phrase
desarrollando,
that emulates
vamos a ir
this
cerrando esta
cycle of
sesión. Nos
webinars,
quedan
we're going to
muchas
close this
preguntas.
session. Fernando, we have a
Quiero
lot
compartirte
of
aquí
questions left.
justamente
We
nuestra
are talking that
user
this is
relationship
a
policy,
little
pero
late in some other
sabemos
countries,
que Aulas en Paz ya tenemos
but we know
bastante
that
información
Aulas in Paz, we
en
have
la
the
web. Vamos
information
a
of your
dejar contenido
website.
más de
On the
contacto si
website,
quieres
you are going to
contactar
have
con
some
esta
contact
organización.
information in case you want to contact
Hay
the
un
organization in
espacio
them.
disponible.
We have
Quiero
this
agradecer
space
rápidamente, José
available. I'd like
Fernando,
to thank
muchísimas
very
gracias
quickly
por
Jose
la
Fernando.
conversación.
Thank you very much for this
No va a ser la primera
conversation we had.
de la
It's not
sesión,
going to
pero
be the first and the
abordando
last
algunos de los temas
of
claves
the
que
cycle,
mencionaste.
contributing to some of these key
Creo que de alguna manera podemos
topics that
replicar
you
este tema, pero
mentioned.
con
In
otros
a way, they are
elementos,
going to
con
be
otros
repeated, but
contextos.
with other
Te
shades and
agradezco
other
a todas y todos
contexts.
por
I'm
participar,
going
por
to
tu uso también
tell the
del chat.
participants,
Esta sesión
because I
sí
saw
queda
some
grabada
questions in
tanto
the
para
chat.
quienes
Yes,
estén
this
en
session is going to be recorded in
este,
Spanish and
el
English in
parte
our
de esta
YouTube channel.
presentación para quienes
So please
quieran
share
seguir
our
en
YouTube channel. The following days, you are going to find this information,
línea.
and please subscribe to the channel as
Y por
well.
supuesto,
And of course,
nuevamente gracias, José Fernando.
once
Muchas
again,
gracias a ti,
thank
pero
you,
bueno, a toda la
Jose Fernando,
audiencia
not
por
only you, but
participar,
all the
que
team of Aulas
es
en Paz
grande también.
that we know is
Quisiera
quite
aprovechar de comentarles que las
big.
sesiones van a continuar
I
hasta
wanted to
fin de año. Va a
mention
haber
that
la
these sessions are
participación
going
de
to
múltiples
continue until the end
expertos
of the year. We are going to have the
expertas de
participation
diferentes
of
países de
several
la región
experts of different countries
y
of the
sobre
region,
temas
and we are going to discuss
de prevención
different
en la
topics in
violencia.
regards to
También preguntaron
prevention
cómo
and um,
volver
approach of violence. And they also
saber
asked us
del
how to
trabajo
become
recién
part of this
iniciando
regional
este
network
creo
of
que
work that
trabajo
we're starting
súper
after
pesado
the
por los
call
ministros
of
del Ministerio de
action done by
Educación
the ministers of
y las
education
autoridades de alto nivel
and the
del
authorities of
Estado.
high level
Para
last year.
eso ya
For
están suscritos,
this, you
imagino que
are
ya
already
se
enrolled,
podría haber
and
inscrito a
I
la
believe
lista
to
de
this
distribución
webinar, and
de
hence
UNESCO de
this
España.
list of distribution of
Muchas
UNESCO
gracias
in
por la
regards to these topics. If you
atención
haven't
por
filled in this form,
justamente
please
recibir
fill it for the
el
following
contacto con
forms,
nuestros
so you are
miembros.
going to keep in
Le
contact with
agradezco a
us.
quienes que no han
I'd like to
visto en
thank
cámara,
the
pero que han sido
people that I
complementarios
haven't
para
seen on
esta
camera, but I
presentación.
have been vital
Tenemos
for
nuestro
the
equipo de
generation of
letras,
this.
tenemos
We have the
Tania,
interpretation,
colegas de
Marcus, thank you, and
varias
the
personas
colleagues
que
of
agradecemos
different
enormemente,
offices. I'm going to mention a couple
Frey,
of them,
a
Gonzalo
Isabel,
Frey,
a
Jessica Lobos, and
Felipe Calderón, a Cristian
Felipe
Abreu, a
Calderon,
Cristian Pino,
Christian Babo,
a Luis Pino,
and
que
Luis
lamentablemente
Pino
tuvo
also, that has
dificultades
been vital. He's the colleague in charge of technology for this
también por otras
session,
comunicacionales
and
haciendo
all the
entrega de
communicational topics
material
as well
y
for our
todo
colleague
también
Javier.
esta
Thank you
ayuda.
very much. She helped us and is going to help
Un
us
abrazo muy
publish
grande,
this
José
session very soon.
Fernando. ¿Algún mensaje
Thank you very
final
much, everyone.
que se nos haya quedado
Final
antes de
message,
irnos?
Jose,
No,
perhaps? No,
no,
just
muchas gracias
thank you
a
very much.
ti, a
And
Ernest y a todas las personas que
thank
se
UNESCO
dignaron
as
venir
well,
para
and
escucharnos y que
everyone
están
that made this
trabajando. Quizás
session
simplemente saber que
possible.
todos los que están
Thank
acá
you.
están interesados en esto, es que este en parte es un
Everyone that
ejercicio de
is interested in
perseverancia
this
y es
is an
muy lindo
exercise
saberlo.
of
Entonces,
persevering, and it's
felicitarles
very
a todos y a
challenging.
todas
So
por su trabajo
congratulating all of
y
you
pues
for your work.
tenemos mucha
And
más gente y estamos
we have
juntos.
a lot of
Entonces,
more people,
creo
and we
que
are
es súper
together.
bonito
So I
sentir
believe
que
that
somos
it's
parte de
very
una
nice to
comunidad.
feel that we are part of a community. Thank you.
Qué importante, ¿no? En este
A
contexto
very
que parece
important message in this
estrictamente
context
sanitario,
that is
saber
challenging and many
que
times
cruzamos
lonely,
fronteras y
the
que hay
getting to know
distintos
that we are
colegas
crossing borders, and we
y
have
precisamente eso
several
es lo que
countries,
hace
colleagues, and educational stakeholders involved in this
Te mando un
big
abrazo gigante, que
collective
tengas un
goal.
excelente
Thank you very much,
día,
everyone, and you
tarde,
have a
dependiendo de
great
dónde se encuentren en la
afternoon,
región y el
evening, depending
mundo,
on where
y
you are in the
espero
region and the world.
que
And see you next
seguirnos
time
conociendo
in the next session of
fantásticas y
Breaking
súper buenas y
Cycles,
útiles.
the
Un
cycle of
abrazo.
web seminars, Breaking Cycles. Thank you very much.
Chao.